Chapter 1769. A Creation, Mo Luo murmured. Looking at Mo Sien in his arms, he felt a completely unfamiliar aura. If it weren't for the similar face, he would have suspected that the one in his arms was his son. However, his path-proving realm had increased by one level. The pain brought about by the creation exceeded Mo Sien's tolerance. I'm not sure when he'll wake up, but what Su Jin said is true. From now on, Mo Sien's emperor path will be above the emperor of true self. Qin Hao's words were more convincing than Su Jin's. Hearing this, Mo Luo's brows finally relaxed, and he felt more at ease. There's a power hidden in his aura that makes me wary. His creation is no less than mine. It seems that I have another good opponent in the future. The elements of the barren era could sense each other. Shou Wu's golden sword eyes flashed as if they had pierced into Mo Sien's body, prying into the void chain in his spiritual soul. Makamanji, Jin Shun, and Hyuning all looked at Shou Wu in surprise. In Sword City, the shocking scene of his life, spirit shattering, and being reborn left a deep impression. The golden lotus of the Great Path and the sword chi that was comparable to a true emperor weapon made even Jin Shun wary and envious. And the creation that Mo Sien received was no less than that of Shou Wu. Suddenly, everyone looked at Qin Hao again. What kind of person was he? Was his luck really that good? Moreover, he gave away the creation to others one after another. What was Li Chuji's purpose? What was he after? Junior brother, I'm jealous. Jin Shun crossed his arms and turned his face to the side. He would rather give the creation to him than Mo Sien. Only then could he and Qin Hao be considered true friends. Haha, Brother Chun took the Supreme Emperor's sword as his soul, obtained the Nirvana Emperor will, and now smoothly stepped into the Emperor of True Self. Are you still not satisfied? Qin Hao laughed. I do seem to be a little greedy. Jin Shun welcomed the gazes that were directed at him. It was as if he was facing a multitude of enemies. The pressure was immense. Sovereign Lord Mo Luo, Mo Sien's Dao will and soul power will undergo great changes after he wakes up. Don't be nervous. Listen to my advice here. Don't go any deeper into the ruins. Bring your people back. What Mo Sien obtained on this trip is more than enough to support the future of the Mo Luo Empire. If you go any deeper, you will lose more than you gain. Qin Hao's words were filled with hidden meaning. In the end, he only had one thought, which was to get Mo Luo to leave this troublesome place. Mo Luo's expression changed slightly, and he sank into a dilemma. He pondered for a moment and said, "The Moro clan will no longer compete with others for anything in the ruins. However, I want to continue looking. Swordsman Li, please rest assured that I will only look and will not get involved in any disputes." The core of the ruins was the burial shrine, where Dinda fell in the past. According to the information leaked by Da Qin, Mu Yue might have escaped there. If the various forces continued to go deeper, they would definitely gather at the burial shrine again. At that time, Qin Hao's identity might be exposed. Back then, the founding ancestor of the Mo Luo Empire went to the Sunset Peak with a will to die. He begged for Dinda's protection with his life to protect the Moro clan for hundreds of years. Now, in order to take Mu Yue away, Qin Hao was bound to face the encirclement of Da Qin and the War God Temple. In such a situation, what should Mo Luo do? Qin Hao viewed the Azura clan as his direct descendants. He wasn't willing and couldn't drag them into this mess. Azura understood this, but he still wanted to continue watching. Even if Qin Hao died a second time in the end, there would still be some people who would remember what happened. They would engrave it in their hearts and use this power to seek revenge. All right, Qin Hao knew that he couldn't persuade Mo Luo. He turned to look at Prince Chun and said, "Brother, we didn't have the chance to get to know each other in the past. Meeting in Sword City is one of the happiest things in my life. Friends are friends, but if you encounter something that you can't handle, don't take it to heart. Just treat it as a friendship between gentlemen and strangers." Okay. Wait, what do you mean? Jin Shun nodded. Suddenly, his mind opened up. He felt that Li Chuji's tone was wrong. Qin Hao smiled and didn't explain. He cupped his hands to the crowd and said, "Everyone, let's part here. Take care. Take care." Hyuning and Mo Luo cupped their hands in response. Wuk. Makamanji gave him a look. Showuk stepped forward and returned to Qin Hao's side. He was as firm as before. "Liwanji, let's go." Qin Hao looked at Mo Luo. Suddenly, rays of emperor light rose from the ground. The scene was vast. They turned into a group of turbulent flowing lights and flew into the distance. "Your Honor, please be safe." Mo Luo hugged Mo Xian and said to himself. Then emperor light bloomed from his body. He flew toward the north with his people. The leader of the heaven-trampling sect had said that he would meet him in the north of the ruins. Since the heaven-trampling sect wanted to get on this boat, Mo Luo would naturally satisfy them. "Hyuning, tell me, can anyone be more young?" Makamanji looked in the direction where Qin Hao left and said, "I only know that the flowers will bloom again. Goodbye, sect leader Mu." Hyuning and Makamanji looked at each other and smiled. At the same time, they turned into platinum sword shadows and shuttled through the void, leaving Jin Shun confused. In the west of the ruins, there was a vast peach forest. This was a beautiful world of flowers. The scenery was indescribable. However, at this moment, an extremely terrifying sword wind swept past. The peach forest below collapsed repeatedly. The raging sword wind twisted countless peach blossoms into pieces. After the wind swept past, only a mess was left. "Father, hang in there, hang in there." Feng Gaishi's eyes were shedding hot tears. His body was covered in wounds. Holding the severely wounded Feng Junfei in his arms, he kept running forward as if his life depended on it. He kept tearing the space apart as if he was being chased by a group of world-destroying monsters. I won't die. Fortunately, that woman Yunro didn't want to kill me. Otherwise, I'm afraid my life would be in her hands." A mouthful of blood spurted out and spat on Feng Gaishi. Perhaps because he was running too hard, or it had triggered his own injuries, Feng Gaishi fell from the sky. The father and son fell straight into a quagmire filled with demonic beast feces. Their faces were covered in dirt. "Emperor, young master." Instantly, the sword cultivators of the Wind People swooped down from the sky nervously and pulled the exhausted two out of the quagmire. However, there were only a few Wind People left. There were only 3 people left with Feng Junfei. Of course, a small number of them were separated because they were defeated in the battle for the Monarch weapon on the plains. In the next few days, their clansmen found the unique mark of the Wind People and gathered together with Feng Junfei successfully. However, just now, they encountered the Phoenix Flower Island, the overlord of the Northland of the East Continent. Dozens of people were killed by the fierce Third Island Master Yunro. She didn't let the human sovereign realm cultivators off either. Emperor Feng Junfei, who had always been as cool as the wind, was severely injured by Yunro. Feng Gaishi spat out a mouthful of muddy water. He felt something was wrong with his mouth. He looked around and saw that the quagmire was full of feces. He instantly vomited crazily. If he was half a step late, he would have been suffocated by the mud or the feces. I didn't expect the third island master of the Phoenix Flower Island to be so powerful. Yunro's strength is no less than Jin Shen's. We're doomed this time. Feng Junfei wiped the mud off his face with his sleeve. Looking at the 3 clansmen beside him, he wanted to cry, but had no tears. If young master didn't flirt with that woman with a child, we wouldn't have ended up like this. A sword cultivator of the Wind People complained carefully. Then, he looked at Feng Gaishi's face. Feng Gaishi fell silent. He knew he was in big trouble. He should take the blame. The woman was too beautiful, and he couldn't control himself. However, she was really beautiful. The woman's face appeared in Feng Gaishi's mind again. She was like a goddess descending to the mortal world. Even the third island master Yunro, who was known as the most beautiful woman in the 5 lands of the East Continent, was slightly inferior to that woman. Although that woman had a child, she still made people's hearts itch. Feng Gaishi believed that there was no man in the world who could resist the beauty of that woman. Anyone who saw her would be moved, and their heart would beat faster. However, she didn't seem to be from the Phoenix Flower Island. Chapter 1770. Feng Gaishi fought with her. The woman had an 8th level of Monarch ring. Her Tao-proving realm was not as profound as his, but her combat power was stronger than his. He, a half-step Monarch Lord, was defeated by her. After the battle with Shou Wuk, Feng Gaishi was defeated by someone else twice in the same realm. He felt a great sense of defeat. The woman was so powerful and talented. She was definitely not a nobody. Why had he never heard of her before? After all, Feng Gaishi's title as the first sword of the East Continent was not for nothing. He proved it with his strength. Not to mention sword principle, there were less than 5 overlords in the 5 realms who could defeat him. Shou Wuk's appearance was enough to surprise him. Now, there was another talented woman in Phoenix Flower Island. Feng Gaishi suddenly felt that his ability had been overestimated by the outside world. Even he himself had doubts. Oh no, she's caught up. Hide inside. At this moment, Feng Junfei seemed to have sensed Yunrou's aura approaching rapidly. His expression changed drastically. He looked around and found no place to hide. There was only this swamp filled with feces in front of him. Forget it. There was no dignity in front of his life. Feng Junfei pinched his nose and dove into the swamp. His face stuck to the mud. As a strange gas came out of the swamp, he quickly sank into it. His Monarch chi was blocked, and he completely disappeared. Seeing this, the 3 wind people's faces twisted fiercely. But there was nothing they could do. They could only follow Feng Junfei into the swamp. Even the Monarch Lord of Wind did not care about it, let alone them. Anyway, no one would know. You want me to use the swamp to save my life? As the first sword of the East Continent, I can't be humiliated like this. I swear. Before Feng Gaishi could finish his words, a turbulent monarch chi came from the heavens and the earth. His face turned pale. Without hesitation, he dove into the swamp and hid his aura. As the feces flowed over his head, it was as if he had never been here. The space was quiet again. 5 men dove into the swamp. There was even a monarch lord among them. They closed their eyes and mouths tightly and did not dare to move. At this moment, the outside world had nothing to do with them. A few breaths later, a group of fairies in bright clothes and graceful postures appeared in the sky above this space. All of them were extremely beautiful. They were the overlord force of the North Territory of the East Continent, Phoenix Flower Island. Yunrou was extremely tall, half a head taller than Xiaohan. Her plump figure was enough to make anyone drool. She was standing on a flower fan, a magical artifact. Her cold eyes slowly scanned the surroundings. She could sense that the auras of Feng Junfei and the others had disappeared. They were most likely hiding. Xiaohan held Qin Bao, Er's hand, and floated in the air beside Yunrou. Both the mother and daughter had a flower fan spinning beneath their feet. This was a flying ritual implement unique to Phoenix Flower Island and could be used to attack enemies in battle. Behind the mother and daughter, a burly man bent over and tried to lower his body as much as possible. He held a huge palm leaf fan in his wide palm, shielding the mother and daughter from the scorching sun in the sky above the ruins. It was the ancient shark dragon of the East Sea that they had tamed. It had the blood of the dragon race flowing in its body and was now in human form. If you want to open an umbrella, then open an umbrella. Why are you so close? Yunrou suddenly stared at the shark dragon. Her eyes were sharp, and her words seemed to be ferocious and lethal. The shark dragon trembled and immediately retreated a few steps to keep a distance from Xiaohan. However, his hands were not long enough, so he could only lean his upper body forward as much as possible, looking funny and aggrieved. Great-grandmother, take pity on me. My hands are very tired from being 2 meters away. The shark dragon was in tears. Tired? Chop it up. Yunrou scolded, and the shark dragon immediately shut up, causing the fairies to cover their mouths and laugh. This shark dragon was one of the overlords of the East Sea. If it had not fallen into the hands of Island Lord Yunrou, it would not have been so miserable. Where did he hide it? Yunrou muttered as she searched with her eyes. She had to remove one of Feng Junfei's arms and sew his son's mouth shut. How dare he speak rudely to Xiaohan? Did he think that the women of Phoenix Flower Island were easy to bully? Sister Yinro, forget it. Don't waste time on useless people. It's more important to find the opportunities in the ruins for our sisters. Xiaohan said softly, feeling a little apologetic. In order to catch an ancient shark dragon as a mount for Bao, they had wasted a lot of time in the East Sea. When the team arrived at the God-burying island, the other forces had entered the ruins a few days earlier. First come, first served, and the fairies had already lost many opportunities to strengthen themselves. That's right. I'm a useless person. I don't want to waste time on me. Deep in the quagmire, Feng Junfei felt that Xiaohan's words were reasonable and considerate. Feng Gaishi and the other 3 wind people also had the same idea. No. Do you think I'll let it go just because I took advantage of him? No way. I must end his bloodline. Yin Ro shouted domineeringly, as if she wanted Feng Junfei to hear her. In fact, when the sound waves of her voice reached the quagmire, Feng Junfei and the other 4 all felt a chill somewhere, as if some part of their body had been cruelly cut off. They couldn't help but shiver. Yinro, over there. Qin Bao's sweet little voice quietly traveled into Yinro's ears. At that moment, Qin Bao's eyes changed. Fiery patterns appeared in her eyes, as if they were 2 balls of Dao fire that could see through the essence of all things. They flashed again and again as she stared seriously at the dirty, floating cesspool below. Yin Ro's eyes brightened. Even though she was the 3rd island master, she tried hard not to laugh out loud. What a great the Arch of the Wind people hiding in a cesspool. If this news spread to the East Continent, it would definitely cause a sensation in the 5 realms. What a waste of time. He's lucky. Let's not look for him anymore. Let's go. While shouting, Yin Ro's extremely powerful the arch intent condensed between her fingers. She seemed to be holding thousands of sharp petals. In the next moment, the space returned to normal. The arch chi above their heads disappeared. Feng Junfei and the others hiding in the cesspool heaved a sigh of relief. They could finally relax completely. Their lives were saved. They didn't have to die without descendants. However, just as they relaxed their vigilance and were about to come out of the cesspool, an unparalleled, the arch aura crushed down. The water in the cesspool surged into the sky, and mud flew in front of them. 5 bodies exploded out of the cesspool. As the sharp petals cut them, blood spurted out from the same spot on their bodies. Incomparably shrill screams rang out in the void. In the end, they still ended up without descendants. In the distance, hearing the screams, Yin Ro didn't even turn her head. She snorted coldly. If the old monster of the Feng family hadn't helped Phoenix Flower Island a little when he was young, Feng Junfei and his son wouldn't have been able to keep their heads. Castration is their punishment. Xiaohan was speechless. Sister Yin Ro's methods were a little too forceful. This was only because the old ancestor had helped them a little. With such a temper, how was she going to marry in the future? Hey, Bao, you're amazing. How did you find them? Yin Ro was very curious. Feng people's wind sword intent was extraordinary, and their concealment techniques were also superb. In fact, if Bao hadn't reminded her, she really wouldn't have found them. Who would have thought that Feng Junfei would hide in a cesspool? Mother didn't know you had this ability before. Xiaohan also found it strange. Bao doesn't know either. It's just that the older I get, the clearer I see things. As long as I'm willing, anything in the world will be unobstructed in front of me. It's probably inherited from my bloodline. Qin Bao, said as she chewed on a candy. Her mouth was full and round, looking very cute. Unobstructed, Yin Ro and the other fairies turned pale with fright. They all put their hands in front of their bodies. Xiaohan was also speechless. So awkward. It's useless. You can't block it. Mother Yin Ro's figure is so good. Qin Bao said with a mischievous smile as candy saliva dripped from the corner of her mouth. Xiaohan was stunned. This expression was very similar to that of a certain guy when he was playing tricks on others. Is it really hereditary? Why didn't he say before that his eyes could see through other people's clothes? Bastard. But where is he now? According to his personality, after recovering from his injuries, he definitely wouldn't miss the opening of the god burial ruins. Xiao Han believed that Qin Hao must have arrived here. Would he be in front? Chapter 1771. Achoo! Qin Hao sneezed inexplicably. His fingers gently touched the tip of his nose as he stood on top of an ancient tree with lush foliage. His gaze fell forward, and a strong sense of vigilance arose in his heart. Through the boundless space, he seemed to see a canyon with strange rocks in front of him. There was a crack in the ground, as if it was cut open by sword energy. The canyon extended straight, and the end was unknown. However, as Azul explored the bottom of the canyon, he would discover that the bottom area was extremely vast, as if he had entered an abyss world. There were many outlines of cities, but he couldn't see them clearly. The entire burial god ruins was suppressed by heavenly might, and the range of his will was limited. However, the outlines of those cities were real. The Dark Abyss. Qin Hao didn't know what this underground world was originally called. In his previous life, he came here with Zhan Wu and Han Lingxian, and he named it the Dark Abyss. Today, this place was the goal of his return. The primordial element of no return was lost in the Dark Abyss, and Li Wanji's injury also came from here. The Dark Abyss was extremely dangerous. There were ancient souls guarding it, and their will was extremely strong. Even if they lost their consciousness and their cultivation was incomplete, their power was still not something an ordinary Emperor Yuan could withstand. When Qin Hao came here in his previous life, he didn't explore it completely. Even though he had the power of the unblemished Tharch and held the sunset bow, the terror of the Dark Abyss still made him deeply afraid. According to his estimation, he, Zhan Wu, and Han Lingxian might have only covered 3/4 of the area. There was still 1/4 of the area that they didn't dare to continue. They would probably be able to step to the end of the Dark Abyss after passing through the remaining area and see the entire underground world. Unfortunately, at that time, the 3 of them were riddled with injuries and didn't have enough strength to support themselves. After decisively giving up, they rested for a long time and chose to go in another direction, entering the Burial God Palace. In the core of the Burial God Valley, every area was terrifying. Strength couldn't be determined by appearance. If the various areas were regarded as forces, Qin Hao believed that the strength of the Dark Abyss was not below that of the Burial God Palace. Perhaps they had reached the same height, just like the current Daqin Empire and the War God Temple, standing at the top of the continent. One was the imperial power, the other the imperial power. They didn't interfere with each other, but they were equally strong. In short, the Dark Abyss was very dangerous. We can reach it in 2 or 3 days. Are you really going in? Li Wanji sat under a tree with a piece of grass in his mouth. He raised his head and asked Qin Hao. Xiaogua, Yi Shuihan, Qian Ning, and the others were all resting under the tree. After leaving the plains, they proceeded according to the direction Li Wanji had memorized. During their journey here, they naturally had many harvests. Qin Hao, Shou Wuk, and Li Wanji, the 3 emperors, swept through all the good fortune along the way. In the entire ancient god burial ruins, there were only a few major powers that could threaten them. Everyone's harvest was bountiful. In addition to obtaining the emperor weapon, Xiaogua and the others' cultivation levels had all increased. With the help of Qin Hao, Jiuying even obtained a complete dragon bone from another force. He refined the dragon bone and merged it with the black dragon blood he obtained. The dragon bone contained the will of the ancient dragon tribe's experts. Jiuying benefited greatly. In the entire team, his improvement was the most obvious. He had stepped into the 7th stage of the Beast Monarch realm from the 4th stage. His origin power had undergone a drastic change. He had almost completely grown from the bloodline of the Snake tribe to the True Dragon tribe. Tianyun and the emperors of the Sacred Palace all had their own destinies. Just like what Empress Shui Yao had instructed, Qin Hao fulfilled them one by one. Tianyun and the others also followed Empress Shui Yao's orders. They unconditionally followed Li Chuji's orders and supported him wholeheartedly. Of course, This relationship had to be established under the condition that they did not clash with Da Qin. Otherwise, Qian Ning, Tian Yun, and the others would draw a line with Denda's descendants in time. It was not that he was heartless, but that he was powerless and helpless. There is something very important to me in the serene abyss. It's not that I'm preparing to enter, but that I must enter. Qin Hao lightly stepped on the leaves. His body slowly floated down. He looked at everyone and nodded in satisfaction. Everyone had obtained great destinies. After this trip out of the ruins, he believed that with the strength they obtained, they would be able to gain a stable footing in the 4 regions of the divine wilderness. This could be considered the last thing he did for his brothers before he left. Of course, it was only a short separation. It was not an eternal separation. To live through death. Qin Hao muttered in his heart. The words the Tao ancestor had told him before he left appeared in his mind. Uncle Changji had used the price of increasing the consumption of his soul essence to divine his future. To live through death. This was the tribulation for him to return to the God Burial Valley. It was not a heavenly tribulation, but a man-made tribulation. He could not avoid it. Only by dying could he be reborn. In fact, the moment he stepped into the God Burial Island, Qin Hao had a clear answer in his heart. He had to die. Only by dying could he protect Mu Yue. Perhaps this was the karma of the heavenly Tao that the Tao ancestor spoke of. Her tribulation was his tribulation, because in his previous life, she had also withstood this tribulation for him. I really don't understand what's wrong with you. You clearly know that even my Tao body cannot withstand it, and you've fallen to such a state. So what are you relying on to rush into the serene abyss? Is that what you call it? Li Wanji smiled. He moved closer to Qin Hao and rubbed his shoulder against him. Is it because of that treasure in the hall that gave you courage? Within the Plains Artifact Hall, 10 days of Tao fire burned the heavens. No one knew what had happened. Mo Xian was still unconscious, but Su Jin said that Qin Hao had given him a great good fortune. What did Qin Hao obtain? You want to take a look? Qin Hao was well aware of Li Wanji's character. He regarded treasures as his life and liked to amass wealth. In the martial Ning Empire's Golden Light City, he dared to steal the wealth of the southern region's 7 heroes. If Qin Hao did not let him take a look, he would not give up. Sayogwa and the others recovered from their meditation. They looked at Qin Hao with anticipation. Not only Li Wanji, but everyone wanted to see what kind of amazing treasure Qin Hao obtained from the divine might that permeated the artifact hall. All right, I'll satisfy you. Qin Hao helplessly stretched out his hand. With a move of his emperor's will, a fiery red radiance bloomed in his palm. A flame-like maple leaf slowly appeared. The leaf was transparent, and the veins on it could be seen clearly. It was no different from the maple leaves that fell from the maple trees outside. Just this. Li Wanji's expression changed. His eyes were filled with disdain and distrust. Could it be that Yi Futian was lying to them? However, when Qin Hao infused Dilly's will into it, the maple leaf in his palm instantly erupted with dazzling light. The light radiated outwards, enveloping the boundless area. Even the surrounding sky fell into a fiery red world. Suddenly, a divine might descended, penetrating everyone's souls. Under the divine will's pressure, everyone's souls seemed to be imprisoned. Their bodies were unable to move. Suddenly, countless maple leaves started to fall in front of them. It was as if they had entered the artifact hall. A divine will vortex pressed down on everyone's heads. At this moment, everyone's souls seemed to have been taken over. A will suddenly invaded their minds, distorting their thoughts. Pairs of bloodshot eyes gradually infected everyone, causing them to lose their consciousness. Just this. Qin Hao smiled faintly. He waved his hand and dispersed the maple leaf in his palm. At this moment, everyone was soaked in cold sweat. It was as if they had just experienced a nightmare. In the dream, they had no strength to resist. However, they were all emperors. Other than little goddess Worryless, everyone else present was an emperor realm cultivator. Li Wanji and Shou Wuk were even emperors. Qin Hao alone had reversed everyone's wills and completely controlled them. It was truly terrifying. If I wanted to in that moment just now, all of you would have been dead, including the two of you. Qin Hao pointed at Li Wanji and then at Shouwuk. Even the direct disciple of Uncle Master Shintian, who was proficient in enchantment techniques, and Shouwuk, who controlled the power of the All Manifestations metal, could not escape. With this item, you'll be invincible in the same realm. Shouwuk's expression became extremely ugly. He had completely suppressed and controlled the life and death of others. This was not the power of an emperor realm at all. It was a god. Chapter 1772. There are thousands of ritual implements in the world with different types and functions. Naturally, there were also ritual implements that could confuse the mind. However, Wu Kei had never seen any magic treasure like the maple leaf in Qin Hao's hand, absolutely suppressing the will of the monarch and suppressing him without any leeway. It could distort one's thoughts and control one's soul and body from another's perspective. The will that invaded the souls of everyone surely belonged to Qin Hao. When he utilized the maple leaf Dao insight, everyone was suppressed and controlled, causing their souls to be unable to control themselves. In other words, he was completely capable of driving everyone to kill each other, and it was absolutely not empty talk. How terrifying was the power of this item? It could turn the world upside down and suppress the emperor's will. Could a supreme ritual implement have such power? The answer was obviously no. No matter how powerful a supreme treasure was, even if it could kill someone, it could not render an emperor powerhouse unable to even muster the slightest bit of resistance. The will of the way contained in this item was above that of a supreme emperor weapon. Could it really be a divine item? No one could determine the grade of the maple leaf. After all, no one had seen the power of a god. However, everyone had the same opinion in their hearts. At the very least, its existence was unfathomable in today's martial arts. No emperor's will or emperor's weapon could be compared to it. Let's discuss something. Let me play with the maple leaf for a few decades. Li Wanji said sneakily. You can't control it, and you can't activate the will it contains. Besides, it's not suitable for you. Qin Hao rejected him directly. A divine ritual implement needed to be activated by divine law. The emperor's rules could not resonate with it. Qin Hao cultivated the art of indestructible samsara to be able to release the power of the maple leaf's divine will. If it were someone else, it would not work. Qin Hao had tried it before and could not fully control it. He could not unleash the true power of the maple leaf. This was probably related to the nature of the rules. The tearing rule belonged to the divine law, while the maple leaf was more like the divine law. If an emperor who was good at mind control entered the divine level, their rules would be upgraded to divine law. Perhaps only then could the power of the maple leaf be completely released. Qin Hao yearned for that scene. Unfortunately, the maple leaf was not suitable for him. Stingy, Li Wanji did not believe it. They were both emperors. If Qin Hao could do it, why couldn't he? I'm going to give it to Honor. Honor's emperor soul is compatible with it, so the power it can unleash from her hands will definitely be stronger than mine. Qin Hao had a warm expression on his face. This place was indeed very suitable for Xiao Han. If she could step into the divine level and wield the power of the maple leaf divine path, perhaps the only person in the world who could possibly kill Qin Hao would be Xiao Han. However, Qin Hao did not know that there was another person in the world other than Xiao Han who was a better match for Maple Leaf than Xiao Wu's daughter. Qin Bao was the offspring of Qin Hao and Xiao Han's bloodline. She was born with a divine body and possessed the 10,000 spirit fire eyes. In the end, it's just a gift for sister-in-law. Xiao shook his head. He had a wife, but no brothers. At this time, Aka looked at Qin Yun with a pair of resentful eyes, as if saying, help her find a magic tool similar to the maple leaf. The weather is not bad. Qin Yun looked up at the scorching sun. It was really hot. Unfortunately, he was not Qin Hao. Aka snorted. They were all Qin people, but why was there such a big difference? Chen Wanqin, Qian Ning, and many other fairies of the sacred palace were envious. There were not many men like Qin Hao. Even if his wife was not by his side, he would never forget her. When he received something good, the first thing he would think of was to give it to his wife. Sigh, there was only one Qin Hao in the world. How good would it be to have one more? At this moment, even little fairy Worryless, who was ignorant of the ways of the world, looked at Qin Hao differently, and she faintly revealed traces of adoration. Ahem, enough rest. Let's go. There are many opportunities waiting for us. There were too many women, and Qin Hao was under a lot of pressure. He stepped into the air and slowly moved toward the abyss. Behind him, everyone followed. They learned from Li Wanji that the abyss was much more dangerous than other places in the ruins. However, the fairies were not nervous. It was as if as long as Qin Hao stood in front of them, there was no danger in the world. Is it really the power of the divine will? Li Wanji murmured softly in his heart. He recalled the feeling just now. As an imperial lord, he could not resist the power of the maple leaf. With Qin Hao in control of this item, he might be able to bring everyone safely into the abyss and obtain the opportunities inside. The group moved forward calmly, as if they were touring the mountains. In the eyes of outsiders, the Burial God Ruins was a dangerous place. Now, it was a beautiful scene. No matter where they went, it would be smooth sailing. Bang, bang, bang. Not long after, the sound of an intense battle came from ahead. Several Imperial wills intertwined and killed each other. There were even Imperial Lord Daos fighting. Someone is fighting. Li Wanji's brows furrowed slightly. Had an outsider stepped into the underworld first? Let's go take a look, Qin Hao said. He suddenly increased his speed and rushed toward the direction of the battle. Everyone increased their speed. Rays of Emperor's light pierced through the sky with great momentum. No matter which force came here, if they fought with Qin Hao and the others for the treasures, it would be no different from digging their own graves. Now, in the ruins, other than Jin Shun, who had entered the true Self-Emperor realm, the other overlords could not stop the three Imperial Lords. Soon, the group arrived at the battlefield. It was a hilly area, and everywhere was filled with the scars of the Imperial realm experts. However, when everyone looked at the person who attacked, Qin Ning and Elder Tianyan gasped. War God Temple. Chapter 1773. See Luke Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. Teaching in place of Senior Sister in the air, the two forces faced each other. One of them was clad in shining armor and looked like an army of the Divine Court. They were all dressed in the same uniform and exuded the same aura as the team behind Zhang Lu when the relic opened. They were the War God Guards. But the two groups of War God Guards were obviously not from the same faction. At this time, in the middle of the group of War God Guards, there was a tall and mighty divine general. His face was full of majesty, and the 9 emperors' rings were rotating under his feet. His aura was very shocking. He was an imperial lord. This person was called Lu Gui. Like Zhang Lu, Lu Gui was also a commander, but his status was naturally not comparable to Zhang Lu's. After all, there was a gap in cultivation. Moreover, Zhang Lu's status was very high. He was the true young master of the War God Temple. Even so, Lu Gui's appearance surprised everyone. After all, he was also a divine general under the Sunset Battle God and represented the War God Temple. However, as Lu Gui's opponent, the other force was naturally not to be trifled with. Which overlord of the 5 realms in the East Continent would not give face to the War God Guards? Even in the relic, according to the rules, the War God Guards were the War God Guards. The Sunset Battle God's name was famous in all 4 realms. Even if there was an opportunity, under normal circumstances, the other overlord forces would not compete with the War God Guards. But there was someone who competed with them and was not at a disadvantage at all. They were not afraid of the War God's might. Opposite Lu Gui, a group of divine bird phantoms were crying. The phantoms of the divine birds were burning with raging flames. Inside each phantom, there was a person. These cultivators were also standing side by side. The light of the flames of the way soared into the sky, and the space was filled with a terrible burning sensation. Chen Wanqin, Xiaogua, Yi Shuihan, and the other disciples of the divine palace almost couldn't help but cry out when they saw the phantoms of the divine birds. Every phantom was a phoenix divine bird. Their aura was the same as Miori's. Everyone's expression changed as they subconsciously looked at Qin Hao. The phoenix gods. Qin Hao clenched his fists tightly, but very quickly he loosened them again. Suddenly seeing his senior sister's Emperor's soul and Tao flame, his state of mind was naturally stirred up. However, he would not lose his mind because of this, nor would he rush over to curry favor with her. At this moment, the war god guards were facing off against the phoenix gods. Divine General Luby's might filled the sky. He was competing with a great imperial lord of the phoenix gods. It seemed that they were both trying to suppress each other. 6 figures attacked fiercely at the center of the two forces. 3 god of war guards formed a triangular formation, and the spears of Tao verification in their hands stabbed out frequently. Dazzling spear glares that pierced through space erupted. The formation was as steady as a mountain, and they pushed forward step by step. The pressure they exerted was incredibly great. Their opponents, on the other hand, were 3 juniors of the Phoenix gods. They had transformed into divine phoenixes, and their bodies were covered in flames of the way. Their sharp divine claws smashed down with flames, tearing the space apart. However, they were unable to break through the formation of the god of war god guards. On the other hand, although the 3 god of war god guards had formed a formation and their spear auras were powerful, they could not do anything to the divine phoenixes. The divine phoenixes were too fast, and the flames of the way could burn through the glares of the spears. They had been in control of the battle, but they could not break through the formation of the god of war god guards. No one knew how long the stalemate had lasted. It was not easy for either side to win. Qin Hao's gaze landed on a flat hill. On the hill, there was a relic of a divine tree. This tree did not have any leaves, but its trunk was burning with purple flames. Qin Hao found this extremely rare. The flames in the world, whether they were natural flames of the way or martial artists' soul flames, were gold, white, and red. The brighter the color, the higher the level. Flames like purple flames were rare. Moreover, it was burning on a tree. It seemed to be nurtured by the divine tree, similar to a fruit. The fire of this divine tree was obviously unusual. The god of war god guards and the phoenix gods had fought here, and the place was devastated. Only the flat hill remained intact. It seemed that they were deliberately avoiding damaging the divine tree. They were most likely eyeing the divine tree's flames of the way. As expected of the ancient Phoenix clan, my god of war once said that if there was anyone in the 4 regions of the divine wilderness who could take an arrow from him, it would be none other than the current Phoenix clan elder. Luby praised. The Phoenix gods dared to use the name of the god clan. It was said that they were the bloodline of the ancient Phoenix divine emperor. Their whereabouts were still mysterious, and it was rare to see them outside. He did not expect that a relic of a buried god would attract the attention of an ancient god clan. They even dared to openly compete with the god of war god guards. In the 4 regions of the divine wilderness, only this force had the guts and qualifications to do so. After all, the god of war had personally acknowledged the strength of the Phoenix clan elder. However, Luby had to take the fire of the divine tree today. This fire could help young Master Zhan Yin increase his power of proving the way. Among the Phoenix gods, the Emperor Lord, who had transformed into the largest phoenix, was completely shrouded in the flames of the way. His attitude was cold, and he did not give Luby any response. It was not that he looked down on him, but he felt that there was no need. If he wanted to take the fire of the divine tree, he should fight for it with his strength. Would Luby give it up after a few words? At this moment, the battle was still going on. The high-intensity killing had consumed a lot of energy on both sides. However, no matter whether it was the 3 young god of war god guards or the younger generation of the Phoenix clan, none of them showed any signs of fatigue. Instead, their attacks became more ferocious. The Emperor Lords would avoid fighting if they could. The fall of an Emperor Lord was absolutely fatal to the team. Moreover, the winner would not have it easy either. Luby and the Emperor Lord of the Phoenix clan were only suppressing each other with their will of way. Both of them had proven their way completely. In reality, there was no clear winner. It mainly depended on the success or failure of the 6 people in the field. However, at this moment, Libby frowned slightly. He realized that another group had appeared in the void and was gradually moving toward the battle. He could not help but be on guard. The Phoenix Emperor Lord also looked in the direction of Qin Hao. The flames of the way on the illusory image of the huge divine bird burned even more fiercely. It seemed to be deliberately creating pressure so that those who came later would know the difficulty in retreat. I want the fire of the divine tree. Qin Hao was naturally not afraid of the Phoenix Emperor Lord's flames of the way. He stepped down from the sky as if he was taking a stroll in the park. He and the others behind him occupied another area. The 3 sides immediately formed a tripartite confrontation. Sayogwa and the others looked at Qin Hao with strange expressions. They wanted the flames of the way. Were they not going to help Senior Sister's family? If Qin Hao, Li Wanji, and Shou Wuk stepped forward and released the 9 layers of Emperor's rings, publicly supporting the Phoenix gods, there would be no need to continue this battle. There would also be no need to fight for the fire of the divine tree. No matter how strong the War God Temple was, this was not the Sunset Peak, but the ruins. Libby was also not the Sunset Battle God. He was just a small commander who had proven his way. Moreover, he was alone. There was no suspense at all for 4 Emperor Lords to fight against one. Qin Hao sensed the strange looks in everyone's eyes and knew what they were thinking. However, he did not explain anything. "Who are you?" A cold voice came from the huge, illusory image of the Phoenix Emperor. It was the Phoenix Emperor Lord. "Haha, I am Denda's descendant," Libby said. As the commander of the War God Guards, several years ago, the War Tower had brought Qin Hao's situation back to the Sunset Peak. The Sunset Battle God had issued a War God order to the 5 realms of the East Continent. Li Chuji of the Southern World Taoism was Denda's descendant. Libby naturally knew this better than anyone else. However, he did not know that Li Chuji in front of him was the former ruler of the 5 realms, the real Daqin Dendi. Naturally, Luby's words showed no respect for Qin Hao. So what if he was Denda's descendant? 600 years ago, Denda had died. Moreover, it was very funny. He had died in the Valley of the Gods. Today, Denda's descendant was here again. Was he here to pay respects to his ancestors? Qin Hao glanced at Libby indifferently. He was just a small commander under Zhang Wu. He was probably the weakest among the commanders. In the past, Libby was not qualified to stand and talk to him. However, Qin Hao did not care. He said, "This fire is beneficial to me. How about a fair competition?" Qin Hao did not want to help anyone, but he could not just go up against 2 people and beat them away. The War God Temple's position was still not stable on Vivian's matter. Perhaps there was still room for negotiation. Qin Hao did not want to fall out with Zhang Wu completely, as that would not benefit him. A fair competition? Are you qualified? At this time, Qin Hao and the others appeared. They had to stop the fight. However, a descendant of the Phoenix gods heard that the other party wanted to take the fire of the divine tree. Was he qualified? The Phoenix gods were the descendants of the ancient Phoenix divine emperor. They were known as the gods. The War God Temple dominated the 5 realms of the East Continent and was respected by the other 4 regions. They could talk about fairness. However, was this descendant of Denda worthy? Buzz! In the void, the sound of a sword vibrated. Shou Wuk stepped out. He looked coldly at the Phoenix youth who spoke. Although he was the descendant of Senior Sister Miori, according to seniority, he should be addressed as Senior Granduncle Qin Hao. However, he was so rude and arrogant that Qin Hao should teach him a lesson on behalf of Senior Sister. "Wuk," Qin Hao said telepathically. "Don't bother with the juniors." After that, Qin Hao chuckled. He looked at Luby and the Phoenix Monarch Lord and said, "Whether I am qualified or not, we will know after we try. You 2 have ordered the lower emperors to fight. Coincidentally, I have a few people here as well." Little Melon, his eyes fell on Sayogwa, Qin Yun, and Aku. The 3 of them naturally understood what Qin Hao meant. They stepped out and went to the field at the same time. Sayogwa, Qin Yun and Aku had been stagnant in the second tier of Doctrine Realm for more than 10 years before they set off from Beijiang. They had not made any progress until they entered the ruins. Qin had obtained some great opportunities for them, and each of them had broken through one tier. Now, they were all in the third tier of Doctrine Realm. Of course, although they had neglected martial arts for many years, Sayogwa and the others were still talented. If they were to break through unscrupulously, they would definitely not stop at the third tier of Doctrine Realm. They would at least reach the fourth tier. In the battle at the Heaven-Shaking Palace, Yi Shuihan was humiliated, which had a great impact on them. This group of people had a deep understanding of themselves. They had also regained the heart of martial arts cultivation and firmly adhered to the orthodoxy of the Divine Palace. They were not in a hurry to break through, but to strengthen the rules of the way. Everyone still remembered the words of Lord Daozong. The strength of the Emperor's way was secondary to one's realm. Strong rules were the true strength. Therefore, Sayogwa and the others had suppressed their realms, including Yi Shuihan. However, they had broken through one tier a few days ago. Now, they were in the fourth tier of Doctrine Realm and were middle-level emperors. Naturally, they could not enter the arena to fight again. Please advise me. Sayogwa was the first to speak. The 3 layers of Emperor's rings bloomed under his feet. They were exceptionally dazzling, flowing with extremely vigorous dilly. He did not care whether the others agreed or not. He rushed toward the Phoenix youth. This person made him very unhappy. You overestimate yourself. In the arena, the Phoenix youth saw that the other party was the first to step forward to challenge him. Did he think that his combat strength was the weakest? Boom! The Phoenix flames of the way exploded, and the blazing flames swept through the space. The temperature in the sky soared as if this part of the world was also suppressed by the flames. With a long cry of the Phoenix youth flapped his wings and rushed forward. The divine bird opened its sharp claws, wrapped in extremely sharp blades of fire, and mercilessly stepped on Sayogwa's head. Competing with the Phoenix God clan? Then he must be prepared to die. Roar! Qi Xiaohua's soul power surged. Her bones began to grow, and her body began to grow. Her muscles were filled with explosive power, and her clothes were torn apart. The demon ox bloodline in her body roared, and the void shook with the roar of a mad ox. Muri was so powerful that even though Sayogwa was proud, he dared not underestimate her when fighting with her descendant. A golden light burst out from the center of his fist. The dilly condensed, and a platinum fist light broke through the air toward the divine bird. The sky seemed to be pierced, and it landed heavily on the divine bird's body. Boom! The void seemed to shatter and collapse under the light of the fist. Everyone saw that the young man who had transformed into the divine bird was blasted out of the 9 heavens by Qi Xiaohua's punch before his attack could land. Miserable divine feathers scattered everywhere. One punch. Many of the elders of the Phoenix clan stiffened as if they could not react at all. Then, their stiff facial features gradually twisted, and their eyes were filled with shock. Chapter 1774. Luo Lan, the son of Emperor Jingji, was sent flying by an outsider with a single punch. Countless experts of the Phoenix race were shocked. They couldn't believe what they had just seen. Luo Lan was not an ordinary disciple of the family. The current Phoenix God clan had the Phoenix clan elder in charge of the universe. Other than that, there were 3 imperial lords in the clan. One was the supreme true self great emperor, and the other 2 were imperial lords who had proven their Tao. This time, the Phoenix God clan was led by Imperial Lord Jingji, who had the weakest cultivation. Of course, compared to the Phoenix Patriarch and the other 2 elders in the race, Emperor Jingji was indeed inferior. However, compared to the Imperial Lords of the 5 realms, Emperor Jingji's cultivation was not weak at all. In fact, he even surpassed the vast majority of the emperors of the 5 realms. His combat strength was ranked among the top in the first realm of Tao validation. Luo Lan was the youngest son of Emperor Jingji. He was a prodigy of the direct descendant of the family. When he fought with the 3 war god guards just now, His Highness Luo Lan was the main attacker. The War God Guards are naturally not ordinary people. They were the gathering of the most talented geniuses of the continent. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to enter the War God Temple to cultivate. His Highness Luo Lan couldn't win after attacking for a long time. This proved that the young War God Guards sent by Luo Lan were extremely talented. There weren't many such geniuses in the East Continent. However, no one expected that a random lower-leveled arch would actually send Luo Lan flying out of the nine heavens with a single punch. It was an absolute suppression and instant kill. At this time, not only were the experts of the Phoenix race shocked, but Lu Gui and the three young War God Guards who were fighting with Luo Lan were also dumbfounded. Luo Lan had fought with these three for almost an entire day. His combat strength was naturally recognized by them. However, an opponent that even the divine guards admired was directly thrown out of the nine heavens by someone else. One could imagine the shock in the hearts of the two major forces. "I'm so strong." Sioba was also shocked. He looked at Luo Lan, who was sent flying, and then looked at his fist in a daze. He was very puzzled. Was he too strong, or was the descendant of his senior sister too weak? Had they overestimated the Phoenix God clan? Qin Hao was speechless. Of course, the Phoenix God clan was not weak, but they were still a force of the mortal world. Senior sister Muri was born in the Phoenix God clan, but she had undergone strict training and cultivation in the Divine Palace. She was the direct disciple of Tian Quan. Her martial strength had undergone great changes and sublimations. How many people in this world could compare with senior sister? Guadi was really ruthless. He had used all of his strength. Luo Lan was not a disciple of the Divine Palace. How could she withstand his attack in the same realm? Fortunately, neither of them had used the power of Emperor Will. Otherwise, this punch might have killed him. In the first move, both sides were probing each other. They didn't use their trump cards, but even if they used the rules, it was impossible for Luo Lan to defeat Xiaogua. "Your Highness." Soon, the Phoenix gods reacted. An 8th tier Tao Vindication cultivator leaped into the air. His Phoenix battle form was extremely fast. His afterimage traversed the void, and in the next instant, he returned with Luo Lan. Luo Lan's condition was not very good. Her Phoenix battle form had been scattered by Xiaogua's punch, and she had fainted directly. She didn't even have a chance to curse. "Your Highness, you are not ordinary." Emperor Jingji looked at Qin Hao. Although his tone was calm, his heart was moved. There was someone in this world who could knock out his son with one punch, and at the same realm. He had never dared to imagine it before. He would never have thought of it because it was unrealistic. However, now it had become a reality. "My attack was a bit too heavy. Don't worry, it won't happen in the next battle. I will ask them to restrain themselves a little." Qin Hao replied with a smile. He glared at Xiaogua. How could he knock someone out as soon as he came up? He was here to help, not to become enemies with senior sister's family. Xiaogua grinned. He dispersed the ox demon body, scratched his head, and came back with an embarrassed look. "Oomph." At this moment, a cold snort came from the arena. One of the War God Guards who had fought with Luo Lan previously stepped forward. His body erupted with Tao Vindication Emperor's light, and the surging War God's light flowed around him. At this moment, he looked like a war god with a sudden change in temperament. The spear of Tao Vindication in his hand pierced through the air towards Aku and Qin Yun. The moment the spear struck out, he was right in front of them. The powerful war gods will envelop the void and press down on Aku and Qin Yun. He wanted to see how they could restrain him. "Let me do it." Aku's movement technique rushed forward. In terms of direct combat strength, Qin Yun's bravery and explosive power was definitely above hers. However, she didn't think much of a mere war god guard. At this moment, a sharp, pitch-black light streaked across the space. It was extremely fast, as though a person and light had fused together. The Tao intent had become one, and there was only a single line between heaven and earth. Following that, the light cut into the surging spear beam. An extremely cold chill rapidly spread out. In the next moment, the spear beam that swept through the sky suddenly dissipated. A dagger that shone with cold light stopped in front of the young war god guard's throat. Although it was half a foot away, a smear of blood appeared on his Adam's apple. It gradually spread out like a flower of blood. "You've lost." Aku put away her dagger, turned around, and walked back to fight behind Qin Hao. Her expression was calm. The war god guard was still in a daze. He hadn't recovered from his shock. Perhaps he was still in the moment when he was facing death. He was still reminiscing and feeling. With one move, it was another instant kill without any suspense. Wong. Boom. In the arena, an extremely violent war god's will erupted. It was as though the Emperor's will had been pushed to its limit. Following that, the Phoenix Divine Bird flapped its wings and let out a long cry. Terrifying Tao flames lingered around its body. The War God Guards and the Phoenix Clan tacitly joined forces and attacked Qin Yun at the same time. In the first round, Luo Lan lost. Perhaps it was an accident. In the second round, the War God Guards lost. They were already vigilant and treated the battle seriously. However, they still lost. This made the younger generation of the Phoenix Clan and the young War God Guards realize that the person who came to challenge them was strong beyond their imagination. Perhaps he was one of the top monsters in the Five Realms. How could they dare to be careless? The younger generation of the two major forces directly joined forces for no other reason. It had nothing to do with victory or defeat. They just wanted to see how high the limit of the talent of the lower-level arch brought by Dinda's descendant was. After all, geniuses were arrogant and ambitious. It was rare for them to encounter such a powerful opponent in the same realm as them. They didn't want to miss this opportunity. They really wanted to see Qin Yun's limit. It was a one-on-one battle just now, but now it's 2 against 1. Do you think I'm easy to bully? The terrifying Tao flames mixed with the astonishing will of the war god descended. Qin Yun shook his head and silently took out the overlord halberd that had accompanied him since he was a child. The 3 emperor rings under his feet bloomed. Under the operation of Amizar Hall's emperor technique, endless battle power erupted from Dilly's emperor rings under his feet, engulfing his body as if he was bathed in the glory of the war god. At this moment, between Qin Yun's arms and palms, for war Emperor Golden Lights burst out. He slashed the halberd towards the sky. The terrifying platinum halberd light split open the void, drawing out a war god light ray. Siowa and Aku won in 1 move, but he couldn't possibly use 2 moves, right? Didn't he want face? Crash! The war god light ray slashed down, shattering the space. It was as if all things were annihilated. The spreading phoenix Tao flames were swept away by a storm and directly extinguished. Even the will of the war god was suppressed by Qin Yun's Tao might. It continued to weaken until it lost its fighting spirit. Buzz! The sound of something being sliced was heard. The Phoenix Clan Jr. and the young war god guard stopped in their tracks. They did not dare to take another step forward. Their faces were covered in cold sweat. In front of them, the blinding halberd light suddenly stopped and slowly dissipated as if it had never existed. "Thank you for letting me win." Qin Yun put away the overlord halberd and turned around to leave. Opposite him, the 2 people who had joined forces had extremely ugly expressions. The moment the halberd light landed, they were actually afraid. They no longer dared to attack each other. Their wills had been crushed. The disciples of the Phoenix Clan and the War God Guard, nurtured by the War God Hall, were humiliating. The space suddenly fell silent. The people from the 2 factions who had been fighting to the death fell silent. 3 battles, 3 defeats. They were all defeated in 1 move. In the final battle, the juniors of the 2 factions had joined forces, but their wills had been crushed by each other's Tao might. They did not even dare to attack. It was simply humiliating. At this moment, Jing Ji and Lugui's expressions were extremely ugly. The competition between the juniors did not seem like much, but it also represented the future of the factions. At least in this generation, the juniors of the Phoenix Clan and the newly nurtured War God Guard were no match for the talents nurtured by Dinda's descendants. At this moment, Lugui's eyes flashed with an extremely sharp light. He looked at Qin Hao with an extremely gloomy expression. The War God Guard, nurtured by the War God Hall, lived up to their reputation. They had invested a lot of resources and effort, but the people of Li Chuji from the Dao sect had easily defeated the War God Guard. What was he trying to do? Was the Dinda clan going to rise from the ashes? Were they going to compete with the War God for hegemony in the East Continent? Was the Dinda clan going to regain control of Daqin? As a subordinate commander of the War God, Lu Gue had to consider many things. He had to look at the long term. However, Qin had to not think so much. Everything he did was to obtain the Divine Tree's Dao fire. According to the rules we set, since I won, the Divine Tree belongs to the Dao sect. Both of you, please do as you please. Qin Hao said politely as he stepped down to obtain the Dao fire. Jingji and Lu Gue looked at each other. Rules? When did they set rules with Li Chuji? The so-called rules were just an agreement between the two factions. What did it have to do with Li Chuji? Boom! They stepped out at the same time. In an instant, the bodies of two emperors descended. Jingji and Lu Gue firmly blocked in front of Qin Hao. Their expressions were very unfriendly. Obtaining the Dao fire? It depended on whether the two of them agreed or not. A battle between lower-level emperors could not determine the will of the emperors. What? You don't want to admit defeat. Qin Hao stopped in his tracks and said, "It is said that the Dao sect's old ancestor is proficient in yin and yang and can reverse the universe. I, Lu Gue, the commander of the War God's Divine Guards, would like to experience the Dao sect's techniques." Lu Gue's expression was extremely domineering, as if he would not tolerate rejection. "I am Jingji of the Phoenix clan. Please enlighten me." Emperor Jingji also spoke up, blocking the way and not giving way. "Want to obtain the Dao fire? Let's fight then." "Haha, I am doing things according to the rules and treating you with respect. Yet, the two of you think that I can be bullied and want to suppress me with numbers?" Qin Hao said coldly. "Two emperors against one? Buzz, buzz." Majestic Emperor Light soared into the sky, and the great Dao sword whistled. A divine sword-like figure stood on the left side of Qin Hao. The 9 layers of Emperor's rings under his feet rotated. An incomparably sharp golden sword light surged and raged, causing pain to the eyes. On the other side, on the right side of Qin Hao, there was also a person standing on the 9 layers of Emperor's rings. Mysterious and strange runes surrounded his body as if they were arranged into a terrifying array formation. "Array Master?" Jingji's eyes widened as he looked at Li Wanji. "Sword Master." Lu Gue suddenly clenched his fists, making cracking sounds. Beside Li Chuji, there were actually 2 emperors following him. Moreover, buzz! Another beam of Emperor's light soared into the sky. That majestic aura was far superior to that of Shou Wuk and Li Wanji. Thick and heavy Emperor's rings appeared frequently under Qin Hao's feet, containing a terrifying destructive sword will. Every time an Emperor's ring lit up, the destructive sword will would increase by 1 level. When all 9 rings were activated at the same time, the void trembled. It was as if heaven and earth were about to submit to Qin Hao. The Emperor's light on Qin Hao's body was extremely majestic. The moment his aura descended, it firmly suppressed the light of Shou Wuk and Li Wanji. Bathed in the sword light of the Great Path, he was like the ruler of all emperors, able to suppress all eternity. "I am also a sword master." Qin Hao smiled at Jingji and Lu Gue. When the two saw his smile, their hearts involuntarily trembled violently. Chapter 1775. Qin Hao was bathed in the sword light of the Great Path. The Emperor light on his body was extremely sacred. He was like a swordsmanship divine master. Even the emperors of the mortal world lost their brilliance. A powerful pressure suppressed his divine soul. Lucan's emperor soul seemed to be imprisoned by the Great Path sword will. He felt a great sense of danger. He looked at Qin Hao's feet. Every emperor's ring was much thicker than an ordinary emperor's. The emperor's was also more powerful than the other emperors. When all 9 emperors' rings were activated at the same time, the destructive sword will that filled the space was extremely terrifying. Even the divine generals under the god of war were shocked. In the Proving Way realm, the reason why an emperor was stronger than an ordinary emperor was because of the number of emperor's rings. That was because Dilly could crush them. However, there were also strong and weak emperors. It depended on the quality of their will. Some emperors' refined Tao quality was very terrifying. When Lucan was cultivating in the god of war temple, he had heard the god of war mention that most emperors on the continent had imperfect emperor's rings. However, there were very few emperors that was almost flawless. The emperor's rings had no weaknesses. Their will had reached the limit of humans. It was the most perfect emperor's way under the divine path. Lucan thought that today he had encountered it. Li Chuji's emperor's way was very likely to be flawless. Even if it was not, Lucan thought that he might not be a match for such a destructive sword will. Although they were both emperors, Li Chuji was stronger than Lucan. Jingji felt the same as Lucan. His emperor's was also suppressed by Qin Hao's sword will. It was like a natural suppression. If they fought, the possibility of him losing was very high. Moreover, Li Chuji had two other Proving Way emperors by his side. 3 against 2. Is there a need to fight? Qin Hao looked very calm. If it were other forces, he would have attacked directly. He would not even need Wuk and Li Wanji to reveal their cultivation. He could defeat Lucan and Jingji alone. However, he did not, because his goal was not to make enemies. Whether it was the Phoenix clan or the God of War temple, he had to admit that Qin Hao's current power could not compare. Lu Guwei was silent. He looked at the 3 Dao proving emperors opposite him. Was there a need to fight? With a simple sentence, the ownership of the treasure was decided. There was no need to fight at all. It was 3 against 2. Even if he and Jing Ji joined forces, they would not be able to change the outcome. They had no chance of winning. However, Lubi was not willing to give up just like that. He took a deep breath, and his attitude became much gentler. He said, "Young Master Zhang Yin, the adopted son of the commander of the battle tower, is not far ahead. The divine fire on the tree is very important to young Master Zhang Yin's cultivation. 600 years ago, Lord War God and Dindi were of the same lineage." Lu Guwei cupped his hands in greeting. Compared to before, his attitude was much more humble. However, he brought up the name of the sunset battle god and deliberately mentioned the battle tower. Who didn't know that the people guarding the exit of the burial god ruins were the supreme great emperor battle tower? No matter how strong a great emperor was, how could he be stronger than the true self? This was tantamount to a threat. Qin Hao smiled coldly. Were they from the same lineage 600 years ago? Indeed, they were from the same lineage. However, Zhan Wu betrayed him and even expelled all the generals of Qin Hao's lineage. Lu Guwei couldn't win the divine fire. Was he trying to build a relationship with him? I also need it, Qin Hao replied. Lu Guwei looked at Qin Hao's eyes. They were deep but calm. It was obvious that he was not ready to give up. He did not want to give face to the sunset battle god and the battle tower. Whoosh! Lu Guwei raised his arm and swept it. His storage ring flashed. Numerous emperor weapons with powerful emperor's aura flew out and floated in front of Qin Hao. There were quite a lot of them. There were 4 of them, and their grades were not low. They were all at stage 7. They were all high-grade emperor weapons. Pick one, Lu Guwei said proudly. He had gained a lot by exchanging emperor weapons for divine fire. Wherever he went, the treasures were basically given to him. As for those who did not give them to him, they were all dead. Qin Hao glanced at the emperor weapons indifferently. The storage ring on his finger flashed. As he raised his hand, dense emperor light burst out. 21 emperor weapons with emperor's aura appeared at once. They were also high-grade. He looked at Lu Guwei and asked, "Which one do you want to exchange for?" He naturally knew that Lu Guwei's goal was to exchange for divine fire. However, he pretended not to know. Qin Hao showed emperor weapons that were several times more than Lu Guwei's. This was to tell him, emperor weapons? He also had more than Lu Guwei. He did not care for them at all. Lu Guwei looked at the densely packed emperor weapons floating around Qin Hao. His face trembled. There were so many of them. Their grades weren't low. How many Overlord Forces Monarch Lords had he robbed? Of course, Lu Guwei did not know that Qin Hao had seized an artifact haul in the plains. There were no less than a few hundred Emperor weapons. After sharing some with Makamanji and the others, he still had more than 100 left. The ones he showed were only a small portion. Even so, it still caused Lu Guwei and Jing Ji's expressions to become extremely unsightly. The opportunities and good fortune they obtained were not small, but compared to Li Chusan, it seemed somewhat insignificant. 600 years ago, Dinda fell in the relic. Now, the East Continent belongs to the era of the God of War. Lu Guwei's face darkened. He knew that it was impossible to exchange for divine fire. Then how do you know that a new era will not appear in the East Continent 600 years later? Qin Hao looked at Lu Guwei coldly. Their gazes were extremely sharp as they faced each other. Take care of yourself. Finally, the light in Lu Guwei's eyes dissipated. He took back the 4 Emperor weapons and turned to leave in the direction of the abyss. The God of War guards also left. What the hell? Li Wanji spat at Lu Guwei's back. Could it be that Lucan truly believed that the setting sun battle god could cover the sky with one hand? There were many old monsters behind the divine wilderness continent, such as the Phoenix gods. The God of War temple has always done things this way. I'm afraid that Lu Guwei has never compromised before. There's no need to argue with him. Qin Hao put away the Emperor weapons. At this time, Emperor Jingji returned to the Phoenix gods and was about to leave with his people. What was the use of him staying behind now that Lu Guwei had left? Even though he was very reluctant to give up the fire of the divine tree, he knew that he could not win against Dinda's descendants. Sir, please wait. Qin Hao stepped forward in the air as he spoke. What do you want? Jingji looked at Qin Hao, who was blocking the way. Was he not going to let them go? Was he going to rob them? Thinking of those densely packed Emperor weapons, each of them might have been taken from other forces. Immediately, the entire Phoenix gods were on guard. I have something in my hand, but I don't know what it's used for. I'd like you to take a look at it. Maybe you can answer my doubts. Look. Qin Hao smiled and took out the phoenix fire feather that Muri had broken after she died. Now, only a small part of the feather was left. Qin Hao held it in his hand for a moment, and his eyes showed deep sorrow. It was not an act. It came from his heart. This is... Many elders of the Phoenix gods widened their eyes and stared at the broken feather in Qin Hao's hand. It was the life feather that all members of the Phoenix gods were born with. But now, the life feather was broken, indicating that its owner had died. Where did you get it? Jingji stared at Qin Hao. The Phoenix divine fire on his body flowed slowly, and his aura was murderous. Not only him, but all the members of the Phoenix gods, elders, and juniors were furious. Like a group of angry Vajras, their emperor was all locked on Qin Hao. Qin Hao smiled bitterly in his heart. This murderous intent was really undisguised. He said, to tell you the truth, I have today's cultivation because I met an extraordinary person. She took me in as a disciple and taught me the cultivation method of the Emperor's path. However, dozens of years ago, Master mysteriously left without a word. At this point, the sorrow in Qin Hao's eyes became even more obvious. This was something he could not control. How could he be heartbroken when he thought of his senior sister's death? Recollecting his emotions, Qin Hao continued, Master's kindness to me is as heavy as a mountain. I don't know why she left me without saying a word. She has been gone for several decades. I believe you can understand my feelings. I miss my master dearly, and as the days pass, my condition worsens. One day, when I was tidying up my master's belongings, I found this crystal feather. Its aura is extremely similar to yours, so I took the liberty to disturb you. Qin Hao bowed to Jingji with sincerity. Imperial Lord, an elder of the Phoenix gods, looked at Imperial Lord Jingji. Although he did not know whether Li Chuji was telling the truth, judging from his attitude and emotions, he did not seem to be faking it. Jingji could see it too. As an Imperial Lord, the matters of the mortal world were enough to shake the Imperial Lord's state of mind. He could clearly feel the sorrow and pain in Li Chuji's eyes. He took a deep breath and said, This is not a crystal feather, but a fire feather. It can also be said that this is the life of a member of the Phoenix gods. This, Qin Hao pretended to be surprised. You have found the right person. That's right, your master is one of my clansmen. Although I don't know who he is, looking at the orange color of the fire feather, his cultivation must be very high. In the current Phoenix gods, other than the Grand Ancestor, I have never seen anyone with a life feather like the one in your hand. I'm sorry, your master. He actually passed away a long time ago. Jingji lowered his head and stretched his hands above his head. A string of cryptic words came out of his mouth. It seemed to be an ancient chant. All the members of the Phoenix gods present did the same. They lowered their heads and raised their hands as if they were praying to the ancient Phoenix god Emperor, praying that the remnant thoughts of their clansmen would return to their ancestral land. The space suddenly became silent. Everyone was filled with sorrow. Qin Hao's eyes were filled with tears, but he quickly collected himself. He had thought before that perhaps his senior sister was still alive. After all, the flawless great emperor would not die so easily. She was a supreme being who had comprehended a wisp of the heavenly path's power. His senior sister might have been seriously injured. However, as the imperial lord of the Phoenix gods, Jingji's words were naturally trustworthy. His senior sister was really dead. Thank you for telling me. Qin Hao bowed again. Since you are a disciple of our ancestors, we are fated to meet. There is no need to thank me. The dead are gone. Don't be too sad. The Phoenix God Emperor will guide our clansmen's souls back to their ancestral mausoleum. For the Phoenix gods, death is also the beginning of rebirth. Jingji comforted him. The hostility on his body disappeared. Moreover, when he looked at Qin Hao again, his gaze was gentle and affectionate. Since I am a disciple of the gods, I will not take the Tao fire from the tree. I will consider it as a contribution to the clan on behalf of my master, to repay his kindness. Everyone, we will take our leave. The relic is extremely dangerous. Please be careful. Before Jingji and the others could react, Qin Hao and the others turned into streaks of golden white light and flew away, leaving the Phoenix clan members standing there in a daze. They left just like that? They had fought so fiercely with the two overlords just now. Moreover, who was Lu Gui? He was the divine general of the sunset war god. In order to obtain the Tao fire from the tree, Lu Gui had tried to curry favor with them. He had even used an imperial weapon in exchange for the Tao fire. Li Chuji was not moved at all. However, in order to solve his doubts for the Phoenix gods, Lu Gui had given up the Tao fire from the tree. Although Li Chusan had once been taken care of by the experts of the Phoenix God clan, and it seemed reasonable for him to give up the treasure in order to repay their kindness, Jingji still felt that it was a little strange. It was a little too logical, as if it was premeditated and too coincidental. Chapter 1776. Jingji looked in the direction where Qin Hao had left. He found it strange, but he couldn't figure out what was so strange about it. Don't you think it's strange? A weathered elder chuckled. His aura was much stronger than that of the elders around him. Just by standing there, he exuded an aura of nobility. Uncle, what do you think? Jingji asked. He was the elder's nephew. Because his father had died early, he was actually raised by his uncle. He respected him and treated him like a father. That Emperor Li might have known about the origin of the life feather long ago. He only used the fire as an excuse to get close to us because he was afraid of us. He didn't ask about the life feather, but gave us the fire. He's not a bad person. The elder stroked his beard and chuckled. His cultivation wasn't as high as Jingji's, but he had lived longer than him. He could see through many things at a glance. I see. Jingji nodded. Hearing his uncle's explanation, he felt relieved. The Phoenix God clan was the descendant of the ancient gods. The clan's strength was extremely tyrannical. Ordinary overlords in the East Continent could not compare to them. To put it bluntly, the only person who could suppress the Phoenix God clan was the one on the Sunset God Peak. Even if Li Chuji had some relationship with the Phoenix gods, he couldn't just come up to them directly. Otherwise, would the gods believe him? If he could win the trust of the Phoenix gods with just a few words, he would be underestimating them. If he didn't do it well, it would make their relationship worse. Because of this, Li Chuji's goal was to get the fire of the divine tree and then give it to them. It seemed troublesome, but it was actually very clever. This way, he could dispel the suspicions of the gods and prevent their relationship from deteriorating. Otherwise, if he directly took out the incomplete flame feather, Jing-ji would think that he was trying to kill a member of the Phoenix clan, which would backfire on him. Bring us the divine fire. If we refine this fire, Luolan and the other children's planes will improve a lot. This fire is of supreme quality. It might be able to improve their bloodlines and make their bloodlines revert to their ancestors, increasing the power of the Phoenix flames. The elder was very happy. He ordered someone to bring over the flames of the way. As the flames of the way were collected, the divine tree in Pingqiu withered and turned into ashes. Actually, Li Chuji doesn't have to go through so much trouble. We owe him a favor. Jing-ji let out a long sigh. The Phoenix gods were very powerful, but the resources on the continent were limited. It was actually very difficult for a race like them, who had the blood of gods flowing in their veins, to become more powerful. The opening of the god burial ruins gave the Phoenix race a chance to become stronger. However, the chance was still very rare and precious. Otherwise, they would not have directly clashed with the war god temple. The color of that life feather is so dark, and its aura is so strong that I have never seen anything like it. Even the life feather that was born with our ancestor may not be better than the one in Li Chuji's hand. I really don't know which top master of our clan left. What a pity, what a pity. The old man shook his head. The orange color of the life feather was equal to its owner's strength. They did not know how strong Li Chuji's way of the emperor was, but he was not at the same level as the owner of the life feather. How could he have killed him? Therefore, there was no need to worry about the Phoenix clan's enmity. Unfortunately, neither the old man nor Jing-ji could guess who the owner of the life feather was. As far as they knew, none of their clansmen had gone out in the past 1,000 years because it was not allowed at all. The Phoenix race was very small. Every year, their ancestor would order people to strictly investigate them. If someone went out without permission, it was easy to find out who it was. In the past 1,000 years, their clansmen had been well-behaved. No one had gone out. Hey, uncle, that's not right. The life feather in Li Chuji's hand is not completely destroyed. Jing-ji's tone suddenly changed. Great shock appeared on his face. Could it be? The old man's eyes widened. He seemed to have thought of something. His face was full of disbelief. He stomped his feet and shouted, "Why didn't you mention it just now? When a member of the Phoenix clan died, the life feather would be completely destroyed. Although the life feather in Li Chuji's hand was broken and incomplete, it was not completely destroyed." At this moment, the old man and Jing-ji thought of a possibility. Li Chuji might still be alive. At least his divine soul must be alive because the life feather was not completely destroyed. In the void, Qin Hao and the others were flying. Showuk looked at him and asked, "You were afraid that the Phoenix race would be suspicious and refuse to accept the divine fire directly. That's why you took the fire and gave it to them." In the past, I heard from senior brother Eastern Sky that senior sister's clan was very powerful. I once thought that they belonged to a top overlord force, but now it seems that they are much stronger than I thought. Qin Hao stood with his hands behind his back. His white hair fluttered in the wind as he flew. There were not many people in the East Continent who dared to directly fight for the treasure with the war god temple. From Laconis's praise, if there was anyone in the divine wilderness who could take an arrow from the sunset war god, it would be the Phoenix ancestor. From this, it could be seen that the cultivation of the leader of the Phoenix race was very high. He was at least a flawless great emperor, the same as senior sister. In the East Continent, the experts were indeed unfathomable. First, the divine soul of the Tao ancestor had awakened. He was a flawless great emperor. Today, Qin Hao had confirmed the existence of another flawless great emperor. Then, by extension, did the other supreme emperors also master the flawless great emperor will? At least, Zhang Wu must have reached this level, and Han Lingshuan's strength would not be much worse. After all, Da Qin and the War God Temple were the pinnacle of martial arts today, recognized by the 5 realms. The team moved forward silently. Through the conversation between Qin Hao and Jingji, Xiaogua, Yi Shuihan, and the others now understood why Qin Hao had crushed the life slip and returned a wisp of the Divine Palace's 300 disciples' spiritual souls. It was because Senior Sister had passed away. The sky that supported the orthodoxy of the Divine Palace was no longer there. However, no one asked what exactly had happened. They seemed to be deliberately avoiding the topic. They could understand Qin Hao's feelings. The Divine Palace was a whole, but the 7 peaks were all preaching holy lands. Internally, there were 7 forces. Strictly speaking, Qin Hao and Muri were the real Senior Sister and Junior Sister. The others belonged to the same sect from the outer peaks. Naturally, their relationship was not as deep as the two of them. Senior Sister had passed away. The fact could not be changed. Everyone knew this, but no one would mention it. However, the mood of the team was very depressed. Everyone's aura was filled with a faint sadness. The emperors of the Aqua Jade Holy Palace did not know the reason, but they could feel the change in the mood of Xiaogua and the others. Therefore, no one said anything. 2 days later, the team was very close to the domain of the abyss. The sky in this area had become much darker. It was as if the distance between heaven and earth was very close and could fall at any time. It created a great sense of oppression and suffocation. Not only that, but the will of the way that filled the space had also undergone a great change. It was much more vigorous than in other parts of the ruins. The pressure that sealed off the will of the emperor became stronger and stronger. Even the range of Qin Hao's flawless will of the emperor had shrunk by half. This was very disadvantageous for them. They could not predict the dangers in the abyss in advance. Deep, oppressive, and suffocating. It was as if someone had choked their throat. Their divine sense was also gradually weakening. It was as if the world itself was resisting the arrival of outsiders. It was completely different from other parts of the ruins. The celestial mountains, sword cities, plains, and so on that Qin Hao had been to before were similar to the outside world of the Valley of the Burial God. They were very suitable for cultivators to cultivate. But this domain of the abyss was more like a demonic land. It naturally resisted the arrival of humans. This was the forbidden land of the forbidden lands in the ruins. Chapter 1777. A crack appeared on the ground, as if the sword chi had split open, creating a different world. On the ground, although the ruins were dilapidated, one could still see the glory of the ancient era. Many sacred grounds were as sacred and majestic as the warriors imagined. However, below the ground, it was the opposite. It was like the demon abyss, deep and oppressive. It was not suitable for humans to cultivate. It was more like a domain ruled by the demon race. Why was the Valley of the God Burial Valley born? What was its original appearance? Could it be that the divine wilderness continent lost its divine path tradition because of the war of the gods that led to the fall of the divine realm? Many questions lingered in Qin Hao's mind. In his previous life, he was focused on treasure hunting and did not consider these questions. Now that he was in the dark abyss again, he suddenly wanted to know the origin of the Valley of the God Burial Valley and everything that happened here. After Martial Lord, there were no gods in the divine wilderness. Martial Lord's era of ascension was related to the birth of the Valley of the God Burial Valley. Was there a hidden connection? Did he also participate in the War of the Gods? Was the War of the Gods a war between gods? Or should it be called the end of the divine path and the demon path? Why did the War of the Gods erupt? Perhaps today, the Dark Abyss could give Qin Hao some answers and find a way to increase his power of laws. Previously, Lu Gui said that Zhang Yin was not far ahead. From the direction he left, he should be in the Dark Abyss. We might encounter the War God Guards. Unless it is absolutely necessary, we should not clash with them. Qin Hao reminded everyone as they got closer to the Dark Abyss. The emperors of the Sacred Palace, Xiaogua, and the others all nodded. The War God Temple was a direct subordinate of the Sunset War God, the master of the 5 realms of the East Continent. They were the strongest in the divine wilderness. However, because Qin Hao was acting as Dinda's descendant, no one had a good impression of the Sunset War god. Among them, Xiaohua and Yishuehan had the strongest reactions. In the past, they only knew that Qin Hao's alchemy skills were the best in Western Lyon. However, they did not know why. After all, Qin Hao's teacher, Dan Xian, and later, Qian University's Yao Lao, could not have guided Qin Hao to such a high level of achievement. Looking at it now, his boss's alchemy talent really did have some other background. As for why he was involved with Dendi, that wasn't important. It was an indisputable fact that Qin Hao had the blood of the Qin people flowing in his veins. Blood ties would not lie. After all, Qin Hao's father was still alive. As for the identity of Denda's descendant, he had probably obtained Denda's inheritance by chance, so it was not inappropriate to call him a direct descendant. As brothers and clan relatives, if even they did not trust Qin Hao, there was no need for them to follow him on this trip. One day later, the team finally fell into the deep abyss, following the cracks in the ground. In that instant, a chilly wind swept through their bodies. Everyone felt as if they had fallen into the yellow springs of the 9 underworlds, feeling exceptionally cold. The sky was very dark and gloomy. It was a completely different world from the ground. He remembered that in the ruins, the vast blazing sun hung high in the sky. Time seemed to have been frozen, and only day existed. But the ground was the exact opposite. There was no sunlight, and the sky was like a black coffin pressing down. The temperature was incomparably cold. As far as the eye could see, it was deathly still and desolate. Everything was black, as if an endless black tide had covered the earth. It was hard to even see grass on the ground. It could be called a true tomb of the gods. However, the scenery within the serene abyss was similar to that of the ruins. There were cities, mountains, rivers, and many sections. The only difference was the style. The serene abyss was mainly black, and many of the buildings were rough and ferocious, making people feel uncomfortable. It was completely different from the aesthetics of the outside world. Perhaps this place had once been ruled by a demon god, but now, even the god of the demon race was buried in the god burial valley. Raise your guard. There are many tyrannical divine souls in this world, and there is no lack of emperor lords. We can't see anything now, but the deeper we go, the more dangerous it will be. Li Wanji's usual lazy attitude was replaced with an incomparably solemn and serious expression. Not long ago, he and Lin Feng had almost died here. Wuck, you'll be in front, I will be in the middle, and Li Wanji will be in the back. Qin Hao ordered. Suddenly, the snake-like team behind him spread out. With Qin Hao as the center, they formed a circle. Those with weak Emperor Realm cultivation were inside, while the strong ones were outside. There were 2 Emperor Lords guarding the front and back. The spiritual qi in this area is different from the outside world. It is full of slaughter and destruction, as if it was born only for slaughter and destruction. Goddess Weyo of the Holy Palace was beside Qin Hao. Her cultivation was the weakest, a lower Renhuang. Because of this, she relied heavily on the spiritual qi. But she found that her Renhuang could not communicate with the spiritual qi of the deep abyss and could not control it. This situation was very dangerous. Once she fought with someone, she could imagine that without the spiritual qi of heaven and earth, her Renhuang cultivation would be severely weakened, and she would not be able to use much strength. Follow me closely. Let's go. Qin Hao glanced at Wuyo casually. This girl made him faintly feel strange. Logically speaking, Wuyo's cultivation was very low, and she should not be accompanying the Holy Palace team. What kind of place was the Valley of the Gods? It was not strange that the Emperor Lords died. Ordinary emperors needed to rely on the Emperor Lords to ensure their safety. But Wuyo was a Renhuang. Why did Empress Shui Yao send her here? To the 8th region. Dead? Qin Hao naturally did not think that Wuyo was sent here by Shui Yao as cannon fodder. Since she could follow the team into the Valley of the Gods, she might have some abilities that others did not have. Perhaps this ability could provide some assurance to the safety of all the fairies of the Holy Palace. Qin Hao was only guessing. He would not ask her further. It would be rude. Moreover, it was not difficult to see that Wuyo did have some special abilities. At the very least, more than 10 overlord forces on the plane were fighting. But Wuyo was a lower in Wang. Yet, she was not injured at all. Wasn't it strange? Many elders of the sword sect who were in the 6th stage of the Tao realm had died, and several emperor lords had died. Yet, Wuyo was able to stay unscathed. Not only her, but no one from the Holy Palace seemed to be injured. This in itself was suspicious. However, Qin Hao would not pursue the matter. No matter what special abilities Wuyo had, it was a secret of the Holy Palace, just like how he carried many secrets with him. Chapter 1778. Looking into the distance, the sky was like a black tide that drowned everything. No one knew how many dangers were hidden under the darkness. This world was ruled by the eternal night. Qin Hao's team advanced slowly in a circular formation. They were still flying through the air, not too high and not too fast. They did not stop at all along the way and went straight to the end of the abyss. From that place, a terrifying aura was faintly emitted. It was like the absolute power that ruled over the abyss. It was the beginning of darkness and the origin of the demonic world. Qin Hao knew that the primordial element, no return, was at the end of the abyss. It seemed to have merged with the power that ruled this world and became a part of the eternal night. However, since he was here, he would naturally take it back. No matter what they were about to face, even if there was a demonic god blocking the way, they had to take a gamble. With the two ancient divine weapons in hand and activated by the laws of the divine path, he believed that he could protect everyone without any worries. Passing through the Black Mountains, broken cities of darkness flitted past under their feet. The aura of death and resentment in the space was very heavy and oppressive. Tian Yun, Yi Shuihan, and the others occasionally looked down and found that the broken cities were filled with piles of white bones. It was extremely miserable. There were human bones and giant beast bones. Compared to the scene on the ground of the ruins, the abyss was more in line with the image of an ancient battlefield. The corpses were piled up like mountains, and there were terrifying scars of battle everywhere. It was as though a divine war had really broken out. Those are dragon bones. The 9-headed snakelet transformed into its true form of a black dragon. Its pitch-black body soared among the team, and its dense black scales flickered with an incomparably sturdy luster. At this moment, its 9 heads looked toward a certain city of darkness at the same time and saw the remains of an ancient dragon that was even larger than a mountain. The dragon bones were thick, and it was difficult to imagine how terrifying its power was when it was alive. But now, it had turned into white bones and collapsed in the city. It was as though it had crushed the city before its death. Even if it had collapsed, it had completely suppressed the city of darkness. The 18 eyes of the Jiao Ying flickered with a restless luster. Greed grew in its heart. The dragon bone in the city was even larger than the one that Qin Hao had helped it refine. Furthermore, the aura left behind was simply astonishing. The Jiao Ying could not help but want to worship it, as though it was a god of the dragon race. Don't be greedy. The dragon bone has been corrupted by the demonic path and has already turned into a demonic dragon. Its Tao intent is no longer suitable for you. If you forcefully refine it, you will definitely suffer a backlash that will make you wish you were dead. Moreover, with our current cultivation, we are unable to refine it. Qin Hao's words cut off the 9-headed snakelet's thoughts. Its 9 dragon heads swallowed a mouthful of saliva at the same time and said with a trembling heart, "I just want to take a look. I have no other thoughts." Dragon of the demonic path, demonic dragon? No matter how strong they were, if they were unable to fuse their Tao wills together, it would be equivalent to taking it for nothing. The clash of Tao wills would result in the backlash of the rules. The 9-headed neonate would not be able to withstand it and would be annihilated in the end. Was it not good to live? However, it was really a pity. Qin Hao also felt a wisp of divine will from the demonic dragon bone. It was very likely that it was a mighty dragon god. However, its bones were buried here and had been corrupted by the dark abyss. Its Tao intent had changed and contained demonic qi. It was no longer suitable for the 9-headed neonate to refine it. It was not a pity to miss it. The killing intent here is extremely strong. It is very suitable for those who enter the path through killing to cultivate. If Palace Lord Yi and the disciples of the Night Luo Palace were to cultivate here, even if they could not obtain any opportunities, the slaughtered Tao intent of the Dark Abyss alone would be of great help to them. Showuk said. Yi Ninghong cultivated the Tao of assassination. Not only the martial artists of the Night Luo Palace in the South region, but also the martial artists of the Ghost Wilderness in the East Continent, the martial artists of the Flowing Island in the Ing Continent, and even Hyun Ing could comprehend the slaughtered Tao intent of the Dark Abyss. For others, it was not suitable for them to cultivate here. To them, this was simply a holy land for cultivation. Qin Hao nodded. What could a deep understanding of the martial Tao? The Dark Abyss was indeed very suitable for Yi Ninghong and the Hidden Blade to cultivate. Unfortunately, time was limited. He needed to get the stick of no return back as soon as possible. Once he crossed the Dark Abyss, he would be able to reach the core of the Valley of God Burial, the God Burial Palace. Based on the analysis of the news from Daqin, it was very likely that Vivian would enter the God Burial Palace to protect herself. Without Qin Hao's help, even if the Dark Abyss was suitable for Yi Ninghong and the Hidden Blade to cultivate, there would be a certain risk if they stayed for too long. Therefore, it was better not to summon them. Whoosh! At this moment, an extremely sharp sound came from below. It was very ear-piercing and very fast. Almost as soon as everyone noticed it, they saw an illusory black shadow piercing through the group like an arrow. The remnant soul of the Monarch. Swoosh! In a flash, a glaring golden sword light lit up in the void. It slashed down and directly tore the black shadow in half. The sword will of all things wreaked havoc. The heaven and earth were filled with earth-shattering howls of souls. Then, everything returned to normal. Is that the remnant soul of the Monarch? Tian Yun's expression changed slightly, and her heart beat a few times. Did the remnant soul of the Monarch realm want to take over their bodies? Qian Ning's eyes fell on Showuk. A sword was slashed through the heaven and earth, and the remnant soul of the Monarch realm was directly wiped out. Showuk's swordsmanship was even more terrifying than when he was cultivating in the Divine Palace. His sword will could completely materialize, and he could gather his will into a weapon with just a thought. She really didn't know what kind of supreme treasure Qin Hao had helped him obtain in Sword City. This is just the beginning. The further we go, the more powerful the remnant souls we encounter will be. It seems that they are full of malice toward cultivators, Li Wanwan reminded him. He had experienced it before. Although he was surprised at that time, he didn't take it to heart. But later, if you die, you die. Do you think you can change your fate by borrowing a body? Showuk said disdainfully. The ruins on the ground also had remnant souls of cultivators. In Sword City, there were 4 Nirvana Sword Emperors hidden in the swords. However, those seniors had no malice and left their will for their descendants. On the other hand, the remnant souls that died in the abyss were full of malice, pure malice. They only had one goal, and that was to seize the bodies of others to be reborn. This was against the heavenly path and reincarnation. Cough, cough. Perhaps rebirth can change one's fate. Qin Hao blushed with shame. He was one of them. However, it couldn't be considered a possession. He used a divine implement to preserve his Monarch realm soul and was reborn in the Qin family of Akita Town. The original owner of the body had already died at that time, and only his will was left. Speaking of which, he also helped him fulfill some of his wishes. Whether or not I can change my fate, I won't show mercy to anyone who dares to touch my friends in front of me, Showuk said coldly. Qin Hao smiled. That was right. Others couldn't care less about the possession. These were all his brothers and sisters, as well as the people of the Divine Palace entrusted to him by Shui Yao. Big brother, look. There are people in front. Xiao pointed directly ahead. Under the dusk, a row of mighty figures in shining golden armor stood in mid-air, like a celestial army that couldn't be provoked. They were the war god guards. Now, those people were motionless, as if they were waiting for something. Could it be that they were waiting for them? Is that the Dao Sex Tribulation Sword Emperor in front? A dignified voice rang out. His aura was thick, and he was a ninth heaven monarch realm expert. "Commander, is there something wrong?" Qin Hao raised his hand. The group stopped and looked forward. In front of the large number of war god guards, a middle-aged man with a majestic face looked at him coldly. This man was strong and had an extraordinary temperament. Although he wasn't as tall and burly as Lu Gai, his cultivation wasn't below Lu Gai's. "I'm Divine General Meng Xiang, under the command of the war god, young Master Zhan Yin. Since the Dao sect's Tribulation Sword Emperor has obtained the Divine Tree's Fire of Dao, there's no need to continue forward. You have no fate with this place. Go back," Divine General Meng Xiang said coldly. He stood there majestically, as if he was undefeatable. He didn't allow anyone to cross his line. Qin Hao frowned slightly. He was unhappy. Since he had obtained the Divine Tree's Fire of Dao, he couldn't continue forward? Was he holding a grudge? Chapter 1779. Zhan Yin cultivated the way of fire, and the divine tree nurtured the rare purple fire. If he could refine it, he would definitely be able to advance to the next level. Lu Bi had helped Zhan Yin obtain the fire and later became enemies with the Phoenix God race. Although it was unclear who had discovered the divine tree first, Qin Hao had entered the fray and taken it for himself. Lu Bi would definitely report this matter to Zhan Yin when he returned. Qin Hao took the divine fire. Because of this, Meng Xiang was blocking the way. Li Chuji was not allowed to go forward. The fortune in the abyss was not meant for him. With a simple sentence, he had taken everything away from others, and Qin Hao had to obey. He was not allowed to step in. Xiaogua, Yi Shuihan, and Qin Yun's faces darkened. Zhan Yin was too arrogant and overbearing. However, he had the right to do so because he was the adopted son of Zhan Lu, Emperor Lis. Tianyan looked at him worriedly. Before they left, the Empress had told them that if Li Chusan and Emperor Ling Xian's subordinates were to have a dispute, the Holy Palace was to immediately discard their relationship and avoid being involved in the dispute. The War God Hall status was no weaker than that of Daqin. In terms of individual strength, the Sunset War God was stronger than Emperor Ling Xian. The Southern Water Jade's sacred palace could not afford to offend him. "If there is a dispute, just follow Shuiyao's instructions and draw a line with me," Qin Hao said bluntly. Suddenly, Tinyun's face was full of guilt, and she felt a little ashamed. Along the way, the people of the Holy Palace had been sheltered by the catastrophe Sword Emperor, and the good fortune was not small. Their cultivation levels had increased, and the Emperor's weapon had not mistreated any of them. On the contrary, when Li Chusan needed support, the Holy Palace could not stand with him and bear the pressure together. However, there was nothing they could do. Shouwuk stepped forward. Strands of golden sword wool circled around his body. He stared at Meng Xiang. He wanted to see if the war god subordinate could stop them. "Wuk," Qin Hao said, "Zhan Yin is targeting me. Don't interfere." "But," Shouwuk turned around. "I'll do it myself." Qin Hao patted him on the shoulder and stepped forward. Wuk's talent and manifestation of sword wool were undeniable, but against Meng Xiang, his chances of winning were not high. Wuk had just become an emperor not long ago. He might have a higher chance of winning against ordinary emperor lords. At the very least, he wouldn't lose. But who was Liao Xiang? He was the commander of the War God Temple and the War God under Zhan Wu. His cultivation and battle prowess were definitely among the best among the imperial lords. Lu Gui, whom they had met earlier, was also very strong. However, Zhan Yin did not send Lu Gui to intercept them. Instead, he sent Meng Xiang to guard this place. This was enough to show that something was wrong. Meng Xiang might be even stronger than Lu Gui. Perhaps after a while, after Wuk stabilized his realm, he would be able to perform the sword will of nature perfectly. At that time, Qin Hao believed that Wuk would definitely defeat Meng Xiang. But at the moment, it was difficult to win. Most importantly, Qin Hao couldn't allow Wuk to be dragged into this. What sort of consequences would the southern region's sword sect face if they went against the War God Hall? Would Makamanji still have a chance to survive? Commander Meng, before the relic opened, the war god and the supreme old ancestors of the 5 domains made an agreement. All forces from the 4 domains are allowed to enter, and everything is fair. Why can't I advance? Qin Hao questioned. Don't you understand human language? Young Master Zhan, Yin didn't allow you to come here, but he didn't say that you can't go anywhere else. Everything here has nothing to do with you. Don't make things difficult for yourself. Meng Xiang said arrogantly. Whether it's fated or not, it's not something that can be decided by Zhan Yan's words. Xiaoguo was enraged when he heard this. Huh? Meng Xiang laughed coldly and looked at Xiaoguo. Good. Then I'd like to see who will be the one to decide. Today, I'll stand here and see who can take half a step in front of me. As soon as the word step fell, Meng Xiang suddenly stomped his foot, and the majestic emperor will in his body swept out. The void shook violently with the sound of elephants trumpeting. It was as if countless divine elephants were crushing and trampling all living things. Tian Yun, Qian Ning, and even Li Wanji trembled slightly. This emperor will was so strong that it seemed as if the heavens and earth would be crushed under Meng Xiang's foot. Meng Xiang's cultivation might not be as high as Palace Master Yun's, but he was not inferior to Jin Shun. He had faintly grasped a trace of the emperor's true will. No wonder. Zhan Yin had ordered Meng Xiang to block the pass. This showed that he had full confidence in Meng Xiang's strength. Meng Xiang was a supreme expert who was qualified to break through the shackles of the Tao and step into the true self, great emperor realm. The moment I lift my foot and put it down, it's hard to control. If you don't want to die, go back. Meng Xiang was extremely domineering. His eyes were like the king of elephants. Jin, Li Chuji, Li Wanji called out cautiously. Even though he knew that Qin Hao's combat strength was extraordinary and that he had a divine item in his hand, he couldn't help but feel a little scared when he fought with a super expert who had comprehended a trace of the emperor's true will. Li Wanji was not worried if they were at the same level as Meng Xiang, but Meng Xiang was not at the same level now. How could the divine item affect his emperor's true will? Moreover, whether Qin Hao dared to use the divine item against the war god temple was also a question. When I met Prince Chen before, I admired his emperor's true will. Unfortunately, I did not have the chance to spar with him. Today, I met a strong expert like Commander Meng again. It would be a pity if I missed it again. Qin Hao laughed loudly. Comprehended a trace of the emperor's true will? It was a good opportunity to test out the strength of the unblemished orthodoxy of the divine palace. Perhaps it was still unable to break the rules of the mortal world. What beautiful last words. If you fight with me, you will have to bear the consequences. But if you can really walk past me safely, I will not stop you, Meng Xiang said with a cold smile. Then, incomparably brilliant emperor's rings bloomed one by one from under his feet. The light of the great path shone on him, and his temperament changed drastically. Faintly, there seemed to be a huge shadow of a divine elephant descending and enveloping his body. Suddenly, the elephant's trumpet soared into the sky. The pressure in the space became even stronger. It was as if it could crush everyone's spiritual souls and crush them. Qin Hao stood in midair. His white hair fluttered gently. The majestic will of the divine elephant swept over and pressed down on his body. His body suddenly sank. It was as if he was carrying a heavy mountain on his back. A terrible elephant's trumpet reverberated and shook his spiritual soul. He felt that his sovereign spirit was being suppressed by Meng Xiang. It was as if he was about to be crushed. There were even faint groans coming from his limbs and bones. A cultivator who has mastered a trace of the emperor's true will is indeed much more powerful than other imperial lords, Yi Futian thought to himself. Meng Xiang's combat ability was definitely far superior to Meng Tao's. At this moment, he seemed to have recalled the feeling of fighting with people in his previous life. Once, when Dindi proved his way and became an imperial lord, he had also fought with a cultivator at the pinnacle of the way. That battle had been very satisfying and satisfying. He wondered if Meng Xiang would be able to give Qin Hao a satisfying experience today. Sword rings bloomed, and the sword will of the way raged. Within the sword rings, torrential demonic flames swept out, burning Qin Hao's emperor's ring into a blood-red light. But it still contained the sword will. When the emperor's ring opened, in an instant, countless sword cries shook the void. The powerful will of the great path of destruction dispelled the might of the divine elephant. Qin Hao suddenly felt his body and mind relax. He took the first step forward without hesitation. Chapter 1780. Meng Xiang's domineering eyes stared at Qin Hao. The emperor's ring beneath him spun, and the emperor's will resonated with the world. The will in his body surged, and a suffocating power descended upon Qin Hao. Boom! There was a dull sound in the air, and everyone saw a dazzling platinum shadow fall from the sky. The terrifying might of the way suppressed the heavens, filling every particle. Everyone felt the pressure, and the weaker fairies from Shueiyao Holy Palace trembled. They seemed to be unable to stand steadily. They looked at Meng Xiang, and his domineering face made everyone feel fear. Qin Hao naturally felt it more than the others. Meng Xiang's real target was him. When a might of the way fell, the sound of swords circled around him. The ninefold sword will resisted the pressure, and his steps were still firm like a rock. Meng Xiang sneered. Seeing that he could not stop Qin Hao, he was not surprised. Just by testing the might of the way, he could roughly understand the depth of Qin Hao's Emperor's Path. Li Chuji's Emperor's Path was more powerful than he had imagined. His foundation was very deep, and he lived up to his name as a descendant of Dendi. If he could not even withstand a wisp of Meng Xiang's will, then the descendants of Dendi would be the laughingstock of the world. Qin Hao continued forward. Bang! Another muffled sound pressed down on the top of their heads. The void trembled violently, and cracks began to appear in the space. This attack was no longer a simple pressure of the might of the way, but a substantial attack. Everyone looked up in the direction of the pressure. Above the firmament, the dazzling platinum shadow condensed into a huge elephant foot. It was majestic and boundless, as if the foot of a divine elephant was stomping down on Qin Hao's body. At this moment, the sky seemed to have been shaken. Countless people groaned, and blood slowly flowed from the corners of their mouths. It was suffocating and heavy. Although it was not aimed at anyone, when the elephant foot stomped down, Xiaogua, Yishui Han, and the others felt as if their souls were being shattered. They could not bear it. Among the fairies of the Holy Palace, Qian Ning was the same. Her face was pale, and her fingers were clasped tightly together. Her heartstrings trembled as if this foot was going to crush her heart. It was too terrifying. Only Tianyun and a few elders of the Holy Palace were able to defend themselves and were not affected by Meng Xiang's will. However, their faces were not looking good, and there was a faint trace of pain. What a guy. Don't let him hurt anyone. Li Wanji and Shou Wuk looked at each other. Will of the will swept out, and Xiaogua and the others could not bear it. It was Will's will was. Xiaogua and the others were not able. Will of the will's will. Was will of the will's will, this will, and will. Will. Will was. Will was. This person was really strong. He was at the same level as Jin Shun before his breakthrough. His combat ability was amazing. If Qin Hao did not use a divine item, would he really be able to survive? Shou Wuk looked forward. His eyes were slightly shaken. However, he soon became determined. He believed that the number one person of the 7 peaks of the Divine Palace was not someone who could be suppressed by a mere Meng Xiang. Even if he had proven the way, he could not. Rumble. The sky shook. The giant foot of the divine elephant fell. It was getting closer and closer to Qin Hao. The space seemed to be imprisoned by the will of the will of the will of the divine elephant. Qin Hao looked up indifferently. The red lotus demonic flame in his body roiled. Endless sword will erupted from the imperial ring and condensed into a beam of fiery red sword light. His body seemed to be enveloped by the sword light. He pointed his finger upward. A red ray of light streaked across the void. The sword light condensed from the demonic flame, pierced through the air, and pierced the soul of the divine elephant's foot. Crack! Crack! Like thunder being shattered and annihilated, an earth-shattering explosion sounded. The divine elephant's foot was pierced by the sword light and immediately turned red. It was as if a volcano was erupting inside. Endless tongues of fire shot out from the sky into the distance. Wherever the tongues of fire landed, terrifying balls of fire were ignited. Many demonic mountain peaks were razed to the ground. Very good. You have lived up to the name of Lord Dendi. When I was still a little guard under the god of war, I had witnessed Denda's magnificence from afar. His bearing was unparalleled. You have condensed his imperial grade golden finger for this sword strike, right? Many of the war god guards behind him had a change of expression. However, everyone pretended that they didn't hear anything and wouldn't spread the word. After all, alchemy emperors were taboo among war gods. Qin had to not answer. His footsteps were firm. Just like his gaze, he continued to walk forward. After a few steps, he was less than 15 meters in front of Meng Xiang. Your temperaments are very similar. Meng Xiang nodded and said, if you can continue to withstand my punch, I will let you go. However, I do not recommend you do so, because Zhang Yin will not let you go. If he gives the order, I will still attack you. You should go back. As a member of the God of War Temple, he had the responsibility to protect the adopted son of the young lord of the Battle Tower. If Zhang Yin gave the order, he would not be able to hold back under such circumstances. Thank you, Commander Meng. Make your move. Qin Hao could understand Meng Xiang's difficulties. He did not want to clash with Zhang Yin. He only wanted to take back the skeleton of no return. That was all. If Zhang Yin did not let go of this small grudge, he would have to force his way through. Phew! Meng Xiang exhaled, and his expression became much more serious. Even though he did not want to hurt Denda's descendant, he knew his position. At this moment, he slowly clenched his fist. The imperial ring under his feet spun wildly. An even more violent aura than before rose. Under the imperial light, Meng Xiang's armor flowed with a strong platinum light. From the perspective of others, he was like a true divine general of the celestial court who had descended into the world. He was filled with endless power. Roar! With a roar, Meng Xiang threw a heavy punch forward. Wherever the fist light passed, the space shattered and everything was penetrated. At the same time, the deafening sound of elephants trumpeting resounded between heaven and earth. Huge divine elephants in armor appeared one after another. Their Tao will condensed, and they advanced together with the fist light, crushing the entire void. It was like an unstoppable divine elephant army. The eruption of this punch was too shocking. The endless fist light intertwined between the divine elephants, and the murderous aura was magnificent. At this moment, the emperor will of all Emperor Yuan in the field was completely suppressed. They were completely subdued under the might of the elephants. The boundary formed by Li Wanji and Shou Wux's emperor's might shook. Countless cracks spread, and it seemed like it would shatter in the next second. Inside the boundary, Tian Yun, an 8th-stage Dao confirming realm expert, felt his blood and qi surging. He couldn't help but spit out a mouthful of blood into the air. The others were even worse. Their internal organs seemed to have been shattered. Their bodies leaned back one by one, as if they were about to be blown away by the wind. If it weren't for the protection of Li Wanji and Shou Wux's Dao might, they wouldn't even be qualified to watch the battle up close. Perhaps, when Meng Xiang's fist hit the void, everyone would be trampled and annihilated by the herd of elephants. Qin Hao's silver hair swayed wildly in the fist light. His chest seemed to be crazily pounded by giant hammers. His body trembled repeatedly. Meng Xiang's fist light invaded his body, trying to tear him apart. His divine soul was suppressed by the might of the elephants, as if thousands of giant elephants were trampling on his heart. The other imperial lords couldn't give him this feeling at all. Even the defense of his demigod body couldn't be broken. However, Meng Xiang did it. This was a punch that could threaten the life and death of an imperial lord, because this punch contained a wisp of the emperor's true will. Chapter 1781. In the air, Meng Xiang blasted out the divine elephant fist aura. The dazzling platinum fist aura enveloped Qin Hao. Thousands of armored elephants rushed over, trying to destroy him. At this time, the 9 Emperor rings under Qin Hao's feet started to operate. The Red Lotus demonic flame roared out and gathered into the Red Lotus sword will. It flowed through his body and turned into a blood-colored storm, crushing the fist aura. Streaks of blood-red sword shadows flew out from the storm, piercing through the void and converging into a crimson sword river. It was unstoppable. As the sword light pierced through, the gigantic elephant phantoms were shattered one after another. The crimson sword river went against the momentum and swallowed everything, burying tens of thousands of gigantic elephants. The terrifying sound of space shattering gradually stopped. When Meng Xiang's punch was exhausted, the red sword river disappeared. Qin Hao was already standing in front of his opponent, only a foot away. Countless God of War guards were shocked. Commander Luo's attack had been broken. Numerous gazes descended onto Qin Hao. His silver hair fluttered in the wind while his gaze was deep, and he actually didn't show the slightest bit of emotion when he broke open Deng Xiang's Dao Insight Fist. It was as if he'd already guessed the outcome from the very beginning, causing him to be extremely calm. Faintly, he possessed the bearing of a peerless great emperor, and it caused others to be unable to help but feel admiration for him. Only the master of the Sunset Peak, the Sunset Battle God, could make the God of War guards of the Sunset Battle God worship him. At this moment, they were admiring Li Chuji. After all, Meng Xiang's strength and cultivation were amazing. The Battle God had also praised him. Other than the Sovereign Emperor, almost no one in the East Continent could defeat Commander Meng. Why did the Sunset Battle God need to be human? He was the #1 martial artist in the Divine Wilderness. Since he had said so, it meant that Meng Xiang was almost invincible in the proving way. Even Palace Master Yun and Jin Shun might not be his match. Today, he had not been able to stop Li Chuji. As expected of the descendant of Dendi, an old God of War guards said. He had almost forgotten that Li Chuji had inherited Dendi's supreme martial arts attainments. From the looks of it, it was not surprising that he was able to hold off Commander Luo. But in this exchange, Li Chusan still managed to stun the War God guards. "Commander, if you're still not going to make a move, I'm going to head over." Qin Hao spoke, after which he lifted his foot. With just one more step, he would be able to overtake Qin Hao. "You've done it. Since you blocked my punch, I, Meng Xiang, am not a man who goes back on his word. I won't stop you. However, let me give you a piece of advice. I'm not the only guardian commander by Zhang Yan's side. Even if you have 3 Emperor Lords, you won't be able to gain the upper hand. Rather than bear the pressure and risk, it's better to turn around and leave." Meng Xiang looked at Qin Hao seriously. The Emperor's ring beneath him dissipated. He turned into a turbulent light shadow that swept through the void and disappeared into the distance. The War God guards lined up neatly and left with him. He really left? Xiaoguo was surprised. Meng Xiang's cultivation was indeed strong. He had been blocking this place for a long time. He had been so overbearing before and had said many harsh words. Now he suddenly left. He was a straightforward person. "Emperor Li, boss, are you okay?" Zhou Wuk and the others gathered around. They looked at him with concern. Emperor Meng Xiang's Dao is extraordinary. Although his attitude was tough, he did not use his full strength this time. Qin Hao said. He was actually a little puzzled. Logically speaking, Meng Xiang should have obeyed Zhang Yan's orders strictly. No matter what, he should not have let them go easily. It was not an exaggeration to say that he would fight with his life on the line. In fact, Qin Hao was prepared for a fierce battle. He did not expect Meng Xiang to leave so quickly. Who cares? The son of Zhang Lu is a little arbitrary. If he doesn't let us in, I'll go in and show him. Let's go. Don't you have business to attend to? Li Wanji said. Qin Hao nodded. Everyone got into formation again and headed deeper into the dark abyss. They first met Luqiui, then Meng Xiang. Zhang Yan did have many strong cultivators protecting him, but it was not enough to scare off the Alchemy Emperor of the East Continent with just one sentence. "Commander Luo, why did you let them go?" In the distance, among the shining God of War guards, An older god of war guard asked the leader in puzzlement. All the war god guard were puzzled. In their impression, Commander Luo was an extremely strict and inflexible god general. He would carry out the orders given by his superiors 100% and would never slack off. Even if the other god generals needed his help, he would not give them any face. He was an extremely cold person. Therefore, the other commanders did not like to work with Commander Luo. However, Commander Luo was very strong and was deeply appreciated by the war god, so they could not offend him. However, Meng Xiang overturned everyone's impression of him in dealing with Li Chuji. Everyone could see that he had held back. Why did you let them go? Meng Xiang lowered his head and sighed. I also want to know the answer. But what else can I do? Kill them? Let alone me. Even if the commander of the battle tower was here, he would not be able to stop Li Chuji. How is that possible? Commander Lu is a true great emperor of true self, a supreme expert. Moreover, the god of war said that Commander Lu is not far from his level. In the future, he may even surpass the god of war and take charge of the war god temple. The god of war guards were completely shocked. Even the battle tower could not stop Li Chuji here. Commander Luo's words were a bit exaggerated. However, it was not the style of a commander to boast. Meng Xiang smiled and did not explain anything. Was he exaggerating? Not necessarily. Not to mention the battle tower. Even the god of war in charge of the Sunset Peak could not scare off Dendi with just a few words. On the other hand, the god of war had already ordered people to kill Li Chuji over the years. Why did he not do anything? The god of war was still on his mind. After all, the god of war was his brother. It was ridiculous that Zhang Yin thought he was the next successor of the war god temple after being raised by Commander Lu. How could he compare with the battle tower? The battle tower had followed the god of war and Dendi since childhood. Although they were not blood relatives, they were better than blood relatives. As for Zhang Yin, he was just a defensive product raised by the battle tower out of compassion and nostalgia for his own experience. Since he entered the war god temple, had the god of war taught him anything? Not to mention teaching, he was not even qualified to step into the divine court. So far, he had not even seen the god of war once. It was clear from the god of war's attitude. Zhang Yin was actually just a pitiful worm, but he did not know the immensity of heaven and earth and wanted to intimidate Dendi. Li Chuji had Dendi's blood flowing in his body and could be called the nephew of the god of war. The difference between the two was huge. One was the pride of the sky, while the other was a shrimp and crab in the mud. Meng Xiang had fought his way up. He was rigid, but he was not brainless. On the contrary, his brain was better than anyone else's. Kill Li Chuji? He would probably die in front of Li Chuji. Although the relic was big, it was under the nose of the battle tower. Meng Xiang even suspected that the will of the god of war was actually in the dark. Everything that happened in the relic could not escape the eyes of the god of war. The sovereign lords of the four regions gathered in the Valley of the Gods, but they did not know that they were all worms under the watch of the god of war. Chapter 1782. If Meng Xiang's guess was right, and the god of war was secretly watching everything in the relic, would he be able to kill Li Chuji? At that time, he would be the first to suffer. At least in terms of status, Li Chuji shouldn't die in the hands of Meng Xiang. Although the world was big, only one person was qualified to do so, and that was the Twilight god of war. In the 3 years of the Taoist sect, the god of war didn't do anything, which meant that he had tacitly agreed to something. Since that was the case, Meng Xiang naturally followed the god of war's style. He acted tough on the surface, but in reality, he was just pretending. This was the result that the god of war wanted to see. Meng Xiang couldn't figure out the god of war's intentions, but he understood the god of war's methods, so he naturally cooperated. However, there was one thing that Meng Xiang would never expect. Li Chuji wasn't Dendi's descendant, but Dendi himself. Meng Xiang pretended to block the pass, so Qin Hao didn't encounter much trouble. The team continued to go deeper into the dark abyss. However, at the same time, another major event happened in the dark abyss, and it was extremely tragic. In the sky above a majestic demonic city, a huge army stood majestically. Half of the army was wearing shining armor, while the other half was wearing cold black armor. They were the god of war temple's war god guards, as well as the imperial guards of Daqin's Empress Lingxian. Now, the two sides were united, and their aura was overwhelming. At this moment, at the front of the army, two figures stood side by side. They were particularly outstanding. Zhang Yan and Qingji Han, the adopted daughter of Empress Lingxian and the first princess of the East Continent. Zhang Yan was extraordinarily handsome. He had been raised by the god of war temple since he was young, and his aura was even more dazzling. Just by standing there, he gave people a feeling that he was unparalleled, as if he was the favorite of the heavens. Although Qingji Han had been wearing men's clothes, it couldn't hide her exquisite face. Compared to Zhang Yan, she was even more beautiful. She exuded a feminine and seductive aura, especially her eyes. It was easy for people to fall for them after looking at them for a long time. The two of them stood side by side, looking coldly ahead. At this moment, under the dark sky of the serene abyss, several figures of the Emperor Lords were engaged in an extremely fierce battle. Even the eternal night of the serene abyss could not cover the surging Emperor light in the night sky. The void rumbled and shook, and the black space continued to crack and shatter. As the several Emperor Lords fought, terrifying vortexes appeared one after another, as if the Emperor power had devoured this part of the world. The opponent of this battle was the great Zhou Empire of the East Continent. From the very beginning, this battle was not even. There was no suspense at all. The great Zhou Empire's strength was inferior to the great Qin Empire. Furthermore, behind Han Qingji, there was Zhang Yan leading the War God Hall. Even though the War God Hall's cultivators did not interfere, the great Zhou Empire's troops were basically wiped out. Whoosh! A humongous black shadow traversed through space like a ferocious beast. It carried with it a powerful imperial aura. It passed by the few people from the great Zhou Empire who resisted and went straight for the rear. Following a groan, Tangung felt pain in his chest. He lowered his head and saw that his body had been split into two from the waist down. It was only at this point that the excruciating pain engulfed his will. The violent rules surged in and completely destroyed his soul. I'm sorry. Prince Wu Dao. His consciousness disappeared. His medicine spirit and life spirit were shattered, and his body was also disintegrated by the Emperor's will. Tangung looked in one direction, where Zhou Wudao and the Emperor of the Great Zhou were. He tried his best, but he couldn't provide any more reinforcements for the team. At this moment, his heart was full of regret. Perhaps he was the first disciple of the Divine Palace to die. It was really embarrassing, but he really missed those days when happiness, sunshine, and everyone worked hard for cultivation. If nothing happened later, the Divine Palace would have been the purest place in the world. Tangung. Zhou Wudao was possessed by the Tao Tai, and his soul became one. He let out an extremely hoarse roar as he watched Tangung die. Tears flowed from his giant eyes. Why? They would encounter the cultivators of Daqin here. Why? They had clearly retreated, but the other party still killed them. The great Zhou Empire bordered the Moro state. Although there was often friction between them, there was no direct hatred between them and Daqin. But the cultivators of Daqin had wiped out the people of the great Zhou in the abyss. Wu Qian, take your brother away. The emperor of the great Zhou fought against two people and forced the two emperors of Daqin to retreat. He grasped at the void, and the vault of heaven shook violently. The spring and autumn brush cut open the eternal night of the abyss, and desperately cut open a space crack. Next to the emperor of the great Zhou Empire, the crown prince of the great Zhou Empire, Zhou Wuqian, a cultivator in the 8th stage of the Tao realm, clasped Zhou Wudao's shoulder tightly with his blood-stained palm. His broken fingers struggled to throw Zhou Wudao into the space crack. Wudao, you will be the crown prince from now on. Brother, Zhou Wudao's huge Tao Tai beast body disappeared into the space crack, and the space slowly closed. The last scene he saw was his brother's physical body blocking in front of the space crack, and then it was pierced by 3 sharp Emperor weapons. Splat! The blood of the Emperor clan members flowed down from his body like a fountain, dyeing his robe red. Zhou Wutian's black hair was messy, and his two hands firmly grasped two of them. Incomparably violent Emperor light bloomed, and he rushed forward against the pain of the Emperor weapons piercing his body. As he rushed forward, he shouted. Accompanied by the shocked gazes of his enemies, his fists brutally smashed into their faces. One of them directly exploded, and his soul was annihilated by the rules. The other person's movement technique was extremely fast, and he retreated in time. Even so, a layer of skin was scraped off his face by the fist radiance. Fresh blood dripped, and his face was completely disfigured. That person covered his missing face with both hands and let out a shrill scream. Wu Qian, my son. The Emperor of the Great Zhou Empire's eyes were blood red. When he turned around, he could no longer feel Zhou Wutian's aura. He only saw the crown prince of the Great Zhou Empire falling towards the broken demon city. After being pierced by 3 Emperor weapons, the power of the Emperor weapons had long destroyed Zhou Wutian's Emperor soul. Perhaps he was unwilling, or perhaps he was worried about Zhou Wudao, so he hung on to his last breath and delivered the final blow of his life. The Emperor of the Great Zhou Empire lowered his head, and his gaze followed Zhou Wutian's fall. At this moment, it was as if his heart had also fallen, and the pain was heart-wrenching, but he did not cry. As the Crown Prince, Zhou Wutian's death in battle was the Crown Prince's glory. Wasn't he unwilling to escape with Zhou Wudao because of his identity? Because he was the Crown Prince. The Emperor of the Great Zhou Empire, your fate is over. A cold voice came from the opposite side, and it was an Emperor of the Daqin. The Emperor of the Great Zhou Empire slowly raised his head and looked at the other Emperor of the Great Zhou Empire beside him. 2 people of the same level joining forces, he had no chance of winning, but he did not think of escaping. This time, the elites of the Great Zhou Empire entered the ruins and were completely annihilated in the abyss. Even the Crown Prince died gloriously in battle. As the Emperor of the Great Zhou Empire, how could his courage and awareness be inferior to his son's? Boom! A ball of pitch-black demonic aura exploded, and like a black tide of death, it swept from the position of the Emperor of the Great Zhou Empire and the army of the War God Temple. Qing Jihan and Zhang Yin were also there. His son could not die in vain, and even if he died, he had to bring Han Lingshuan's daughter and Zhanlo's son with him. As expected, he found the inheritance of a demonic master. He really dared to merge with it. The dazzling Emperor's light flowed on the bodies of the 2 Daqin Emperor of the Great Zhou Empire. Seeing the demonic aura erupting from the Emperor of the Great Zhou Empire, they were slightly surprised, but there was no fear on their faces. Did he think he could defeat them by merging with the remnant soul of a demonic master? Impossible. The 2 of them looked at each other, and then an incomparably brilliant Emperor's light radiated, blocking the spread of the demonic aura. The forehead of one of the Daqin emperors suddenly shone with an incomparably dazzling divine light, and a divine eye appeared in the divine light. He stared at the Emperor of the Great Zhou Empire, and a terrifying divine light shot out from the divine eye, as if it could cut through all the darkness in the world. The demonic aura was also destroyed. Where the gaze passed, the demonic aura melted, and it directly shot through Emperor of the Great Zhou Empire's body and soul, and also peered into the incomplete demonic soul in the soul. Give him a dignified death, the 3-eyed Emperor said to the Emperor beside him. The Emperor beside him sneered, and his body leaned back slightly. He raised his arm, and a divine spear condensed in his palm. He held it firmly, and the 9 Emperor's rings under his feet rotated. An incomparably terrifying power of the pinnacle of the Great Way exploded, and the abyss trembled. Then, the rules merged with the divine spear of the Emperor's soul, and it fell from the sky. Boom! Between heaven and earth, there was a burst of brilliant light. An Emperor of the Great Zhou Empire's aura and the radiating demonic aura disappeared. Chapter 1783. The Three-Eyed Emperor, Taiwi Holy Lord, was an expert under Empress Ling Xian of the Daqin Empire. Just like his name, the Three-Eyed Emperor had 3 eyes. The third eye was in the middle of his forehead. It was a monarch soul eye and was very powerful. The divine light it shot out could destroy all darkness-type powers. It was extremely domineering and was the nemesis of darkness and demons. The Three-Eyed Emperor would not open his divine eye easily. Only when he was in an extreme situation where his life or the lives of the people he was protecting were threatened would he open his third divine eye and shoot out the divine light. Among the emperors in the 5 worlds of the East Continent, the Three-Eyed Emperor was definitely one of the best. Taiwi Holy Lord's cultivation was higher than the Three-Eyed Emperor, and he had comprehended a strand of Emperor true intent. His Monarch Soul Divine Spear was said to be able to pierce through the defenses of any Monarch weapon in the world, including supreme Monarch weapons. One could imagine how powerful it was. These 2 were ordered by Empress Ling Xian to protect Qingji Han. Besides them, there was another expert. When the God Burial ruins opened, the Daqin Empire sent out 3 emperors to protect the first princess of the East Continent. Whether it was battle strength or lineup, they were extremely terrifying. The other overlords could not resist at all. However, the third expert was not in the Dark Abyss. He was on another mission. Even so, the Three-Eyed Emperor and Tai Wei were enough to protect Qingji Han. In this battle, they wiped out the Great Zhou Empire from the East Continent in an instant. It was clear how strong their battle strength was. Without the support of the Supreme Grandmasters, the Great Zhou Empire sent out all their elites. The emperors of the royal family and the talented juniors were all gathered. The lineup itself was not to be underestimated. However, they encountered the experts of the Daqin Empire and were all killed in an instant. Only Prince Zhou Wudao managed to escape with great difficulty. Just now, Zhou Di borrowed the power of the Dark Abyss demonic lord to die with them. He wanted to drag Han Qingji and Zhang Yin down with him. The Three-Eyed Emperor and Taiwi Holy Lord were threatened and did not hesitate to use their Monarch Soul intent. Under the divine light, even the Dark Abyss demonic lord's remnant soul was destroyed. Zhoudi's entire body was blasted into ashes by Taiwi Holy Lord's spear. Not even his bones remain. Honorable enough, right? Sacred Lord Tai Hui, who was wearing a pitch-black crystal armor, looked at Zhou Di's Dao intent with admiration. He spoke to the Three-Eyed Divine Lord beside him. The divine eye on San Mu's forehead disappeared as if it had merged with his flesh and blood. He shrugged and said it casually, but Tai Hui took it seriously. It felt like a ceremony. Senior Three-Eyed and Senior Taiwi are both transcendents of Daqin. Today, Zhang Yin is deeply honored to be able to see the divine eye illumination and the heavenly punishment divine spear. In the distance, Zhang Yin, who had been watching the battle with a smile, praised Qingji Han. Qingji Han looked at Zhang Yin expressionlessly. If Zhang Yin had not stirred up trouble and started the conflict, the Great Zhou royal family would not have been killed so cruelly. All of this was because of Zhang Yin. Although Han Qingji and Zhou Wudao did not have any interactions, they both cultivated in the Divine Palace and fought side by side in order to resist the holy essence of the evil spirit. Now that her father and brother were dead and all the powerful cultivators of her tribe were wiped out, the Great Zhou Empire did not have much vitality left in this battle. Han Qingji could not say that she was sad, but she was a little emotional. Why do you keep staring there? Just now, I ordered Lu Gui to chase after him. Zhou Wudao can't escape at all. Zhang Yin laughed. The Great Zhou Empire and the Moro state often had conflicts. Since the Moro state was a vassal state of the Daqin should teach them a lesson. They should take advantage of the fact that Zhou Wendi was not in the ruins to wipe out the elites of the Moro state. Zhang Yin thought that he understood Qingji Han very well. The princess must want to do this in her heart. However, girls had to care about their image. If they were too vicious, it would be easy for people to think that they were evil. Thus, he could only do it for her. He deliberately made things difficult for the Zhou clan. stirring up trouble and forcing them to fight back. San Mu and Tai Hui could eliminate them in the name of protecting the young master. It was a wonderful thing. Zhang Yin personally thought that the princess must be very happy in her heart. Don't meddle in the affairs of the Daqin, Qing Jihan said calmly. Zhang Yin ordered Lu Gui to chase after Zhou Wudao. Zhou Wudao probably couldn't escape. Boom! Suddenly, in the Moro city below, a turbulent Black Emperor's qi erupted and turned into a killing storm. The figures of the top Renhuangs of the Daqin were hit by the storm and were directly torn to pieces. Among them, there was even a lower Emperor Yuan who was seriously injured and flew out with blood spurting out. Because his legs were half a beat slower, he accidentally fell into the storm and was twisted into minced meat on the spot. He howled in pain. What's going on? Sanmu looked over with a serious face. There were still survivors of the great Zhou royal family. Did they escape? Sacred Lord Tai Wei grabbed downward, and the entire body of the lower Emperor Yuan of the Daqin Empire with broken legs was sucked over. He grabbed the collar of the other party and stared at him with a solemn face. Ignoring the blood that was still spurting out from Emperor Yuan's body, he asked in a deep voice, "What happened just now?" If he guessed correctly, there were no Emperor Yuan powerhouses in the great Zhou royal family in the battle in the Moro city below. This was because the emperors had long been killed by them. Why did a Black Emperor's qi burst out? Middle-level Emperor Yuan, one of them, hid his cultivation. He's not a Renhuang at all, but a six-stage Dao affirmation powerhouse. Sacred Lord, save me, save me. This person screamed. His legs were infected by the rules and were constantly being corroded. His life was in danger. Treat his injuries. Sacred Lord Tai, we casually threw him into the Daqin army. A mere lower Emperor Yuan wasn't qualified for him to treat him personally. Naturally, there would be others who would do it for him. At this time, Sacred Lord Tai Wei looked at Sanmu. He saw that Sanmu's eyes were closed, and his sacred halo flickered on his forehead. His emperor's will radiated outwards, covering an area of 10,000 miles. It was as if he had already found out who had escaped. Strange. The divine light on Sanmu's forehead dissipated, and he frowned. What's wrong? Sacred Lord, Tai Wei asked. I can't find the person. I can only roughly lock onto the other party's aura. However, this aura didn't exist in the great Zhou royal family's army before. Who is it? Sanmu shook his head. Even he couldn't see the appearance of that person. The other party's emperors was also very strange. It seemed to have merged with the entire dark abyss, making it very suitable for him to hide. A fish that escaped the net can't cause much trouble. Let him be, Taui said nonchalantly. Taihui said indifferently. Even if three eyes divine, I could not see through this person. Interesting. At this time, an extremely tyrannical emperor's qi flew over from afar and gradually approached. The aura was abnormally strong. Just feeling this power from afar, Sanmu and Taihui's hearts trembled. Then, the two slowly revealed a smile. It was Commander Meng Xiang of the War God Temple. They didn't know if Commander Meng Xiang had completed young Master Zhang Yan's order and expelled Li Chuji from the Dark Abyss. However, with Commander Meng Xiang's cultivation, it shouldn't be difficult. Under the Dark Abyss, a burly young man with a large number of demonic runes on his body was running through the earth. Wherever he passed, his blood dyed the demonic earth. His aura was constantly weakening. After he passed, the blood immediately merged with the demonic earth as if they were of the same origin. There wasn't a trace left behind. Prince Wudao, Prince Wudao. The burly young man kept calling out a name. It was as if he would forget it if he stopped. This person was Bai Xiaotong. However, he wasn't the thin and weak Bai Xiaotong who vomited as soon as he boarded the ship. Chapter 1784. The royal family of the great Zhou dynasty who had entered the serene abyss were all slaughtered. Sanmu and Tai Wei did not stay for long. They continued to protect Qing Han and continued to venture deeper. It seemed that the power at the end of the serene abyss was also attracting them. As for Zhou Wudao, who had escaped, Zhang Yin ordered Lupi to chase after him. Naturally, he would not survive. There was no suspense at all about this. However, Meng Xiang returned and said something that surprised Samu and Tai Wei. They could not stop Li Chuji from moving forward. With Meng Xiang's cultivation, he could not stop Li Chuji? Samu and Tai Wei were skeptical. However, Meng Xiang admitted it himself, which proved that Li Chuji was still in the serene abyss. Perhaps he was not far behind them. Sooner or later, they would bump into each other. Zhang Yan's face was a little unhappy. A powerhouse at the peak of the Tao realm could not stop a mere Li Chuji. Did Meng Xiang go easy on him? However, Meng Xiang was not such a person. Otherwise, he would not have been sent. At this time, Zhang Yin realized that he might have underestimated the ability of Dinda's descendant. However, he did not care too much and did not blame Meng Xiang for his incompetence. At this point, since Li Chuji dared to chase after him, he wanted to see if he still had the courage to compete with him, the successor of the War God Temple. In terms of status, Dinda's descendant was qualified to compete with him. It did not lower Zhang Yan's status. In fact, he was even looking forward to it, burning everything and refining other flames. This is Zhang Yan's ability, Hellfire. In the serene abyss, a group of powerhouses flew slowly toward the end. On the way, Tianyin told Qin how about Zhang Yan's situation. This was not a secret. The forces of the 5 realms of the East Continent all knew about Zhang Yan's ability. However, Qin did not know. After all, when Dindi was at his peak, Zhang Yan's mother was still in someone else's placenta. Hellfire ranked 5th on the continent's Soulfire list. No wonder you were a little arrogant. Qin calmly smiled. Zhang Yan's Soulfire rank was much higher than Duan Ziju's, and he had also been adopted by the Battle Tower. His status had been noble since he was a child, and he had been crowned as the young master of the War God Temple. How could he not be arrogant? Hellfire could burn all things, and it could refine other Tao flames. Its power was indeed not to be underestimated. In his previous life, it was even stronger than the sunset flame that Qin obtained. However, the Hellfire could only stay in the 9 underworlds. How could it burn the world's #1 tyrannical Red Lotus? In the mortal world, other than the Dragon King's flame, there was no other flame that dared to compete with the Red Lotus. As for the Dragon King's flame, it had long ceased to exist along with the extinction of the ancient fire dragon bloodline. Hellfire belongs to the dark attribute. There are many opportunities in this serene abyss that are beneficial to Zhang Yin. No wonder he took the risk to come here. Li Wanji said with a sour tone. With Meng Xiang, a powerhouse who was half a step into the true self-Tharch realm, as well as Lu Gui and a large number of War God Temple's emperors, it wasn't difficult for Zhang Yin to obtain any opportunities in the ruins. On the other hand, Li Wanji, a dignified emperor lord, had to be careful when taking some treasures. He almost died at the end of the serene abyss. On the other hand, Zhang Yin was protected by a large number of powerhouses, and treasures were easily available. He was born as a proud son of heaven, and he could get whatever he wanted. No matter how high one's cultivation level was, it couldn't be compared to a good background. Putting aside Meng Xiang and Lu Gui, a low-level Archuan is nothing in front of you. Is there a need to be envious? Qin chuckled. That's true. If he dares to run in front of me, I can crush as many ants as I want, Li Wanji said proudly. It seemed that cultivation was more important. Zhang Yin grew up under the protection of the Battle Tower. He has never suffered and doesn't understand the hardships of cultivation. In fact, his combat power is restricted, and his strength is extremely limited. Even if he has Hellfire, he can't win against Xue Han. Qin gave a simple evaluation. Don't, boss. It's embarrassing for me to compare my cultivation level with him. Xue Han said with disdain. Ha ha ha. Suddenly, there was a burst of laughter from the team. Zhang Yin was in the 2nd tier of the path-proving realm. His realm was very low, but even if he was in the same realm as Xue Han, he was no match for the disciples of the Divine Palace. In terms of background, the former was dazzling, but in terms of the foundation of the path-proving realm, Zhang Yin was no different from a flower in a greenhouse. A little storm could destroy his path heart and make him doubt his life. When the relic opened, the battle tower and Singang showed up, while Zhang Yin stayed with Qingji Han. On this trip, we are very likely to meet the team of Daqin. Qin Hao remembered clearly that Zhang Yin and Qingji Han were very close, and their relationship was not ordinary. Zhang Yin's status was extraordinary, and he was close to Qingji Han, unlike Mo Xian. Mo Luo Kingdom was a vassal state of Daqin and was a subordinate state. Mo Xian would not have any improper thoughts, but Zhang Yin dared to, and he might be very confident. Qingji Han's primordial spirit was the Eye of Nirvana, which contained the power of slaughter and destruction, which was a perfect match for the attributes of the deep abyss. Therefore, the possibility of the existence of the team of Daqin was very high. Well, Tian Yin frowned. This trip to the Divine Palace is enough to answer to Shui Yao. Why don't you go back? It's not too late to turn back now, Qin Hao said. If they continued to go deeper, it would be difficult for Tian Yin and the others to leave, even if they wanted to. They would have to be accompanied by Qin Hao to safely walk out of the deep abyss. Tian Yin did not respond directly. She looked at Wu Yo, and it was unknown what Wu Yo was trying to convey to her. In the next second, Tian Yin said calmly, "Let's continue. If there is a dispute, we will follow the Emperor's instructions and draw a clear line with Swordmaster Li. At that time, I hope Emperor Li will not blame us. Moreover, the powerhouses of Daqin will not bother to make a move on a group of women from the south, right?" After saying this, Tian Yin secretly looked at Wu Yo again, and a faint smile appeared on Wu Yo's face. "Well, when the time comes, little melon, you must also draw a clear line with me and not interfere." Qin Hao preached at Sayogwa and the others. Sayogwa nodded slightly, looking very unnatural. The team moved forward calmly. After everything was explained, Qin Hao had no more worries. For this trip, he firmly remembered the 4 words of the Taoist ancestors' divination, live toward death, so they would definitely encounter some kind of accident. Buzz, crack. Suddenly, in the space, there was a strange force approaching quickly from the front. It was very fast. Qin Hao, Li Wanji, and Shouwuk realized it almost at the same time. It was the spatial teleportation performed by the powerhouse of the Emperor Dao. Could it be that the nightmare vision had returned? While they were puzzled, the force soon appeared in front of them. Coincidentally, the place where the other party teleported was right above Qin Hao's team. Under the evening sky, a crack spread out from the sky, and then the Emperor's light overflowed. With a crash, the space shattered, and a messy body fell down, smashing towards Qin Hao and the others. This figure was in a rather miserable state. His entire body was covered in blood, and his clothes were tattered. It was obvious that he had suffered heavy injuries. His aura was very unstable, and his hair was disheveled. Before Qin Hao could see his face clearly, a roar came out from his mouth. "Kill!" Zhou Wudao was highly nervous. After escaping from a situation where his family members were slaughtered, his mind was in a mess. In his subconscious mind, there wouldn't be any family members in the dark abyss. In order to survive, no matter what happened, he would naturally make the first move. Cold, killing intent swept towards the team. It was extremely cold. The Emperor's light was released, and the will of the Tao condensed into countless death crows, covering the sky and the sun. They crazily bit towards the top of everyone's heads. At this moment, there was a slight commotion in the team. Shouwuk snorted coldly. The Emperor's ring under his feet immediately bloomed, and the sword will radiated throughout the void. He pointed his finger toward the sky. Immediately, sharp golden sword shadows flew out from the Emperor's ring, drawing a beautiful shadow as they charged towards the death crows in the sky. Zhou Wudao's cultivation was in the 6th stage of the Dao realm, and his Emperor's soul was injured. Shouwuk was a sword master powerhouse who had reached the peak of the Dao realm. His sword was extremely powerful. As soon as the two's attacks collided, the death crows in the sky were instantly destroyed by the sword light. The golden sword river moved forward fiercely, directly swallowing Zhou Wudao's entire body. He had no way to fight back at all. Under the Emperor's sword, Emperor Yuan was no different from an ant. Death was coming, and the sword will invaded his divine soul. At this moment, Zhou Wudao's mind became clearer. Sword will. There was no sword emperor in Da Qin's team. The other party wasn't an enemy. Unfortunately, it was too late. When the infinite sword will filled the space, Zhou Wudao couldn't escape death. Buzz! A body surrounded by demonic flames blocked in the middle in time. The figure was majestic, and the blood-colored demonic flames reflected in the eyes. It made people tremble in fear, but in Zhou Wudao's eyes, he felt a sense of familiarity. Tears flowed down his cheeks uncontrollably. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. The ear-piercing sword chime seemed to pierce through the heavens and everything. However, when it came into contact with the demonic flames, the solid golden emperor sword directly melted. It was as if even the sword will had merged into the demonic flames. Qin Hao's Dao root was stronger than Shouwuk's. The red lotus tyrannical fire directly merged with the sword will of all things. How did you become like this? Qin Hao's heart trembled, and his face was full of shock as he spoke to Zhou Wudao. The person in front of him didn't have any of the elegance he had during the Northern Border Imperial Martial competition. He was completely different from the Prince of Great Zhou in the past. To put it bluntly, he was even worse than a death row prisoner. At least, the death row prisoner's clothes were cleaner and more presentable than Zhou Wudao's before his death. How did he become like this? Hearing this, Zhou Wudao choked with sobs. He slowly stretched out his hands and grabbed Qin Hao's arms. The strength in his 5 fingers became stronger and stronger, and his expression was one of extreme pain. He shook his head continuously, as if he was struggling for a long time. Only then did he muster the courage to speak. Tears streamed down his face as he said, "Dead. My father, elder brother, royal uncle, elders, and the various geniuses of Great Zhou were all killed. Tangung is dead. They're all dead." "What?" At the side, Shouwuk and the rest walked over. They were shocked when they heard the grievous news. The Great Zhou royal family was annihilated in the abyss. Furthermore, even Tangung was... Qin Hao's heart thumped heavily. Then, his face darkened. He said, "Who did it?" The Great Zhou Empire, the dominant force of the East Continent, sent out all their elites when the burial god ruins opened. The Great Zhou Emperor followed the team, but they were all killed. Even the Great Zhou Emperor was not spared. One could imagine how powerful the opponent was. Could it be Li Xiang? Impossible. Li Xiang just left Qin Hao's side not long ago. Was it Lu Ming? Lu Ming's cultivation was not bad. He was a commander under the god of war. His strength was indeed higher than Emperor Zhou's, but the gap was not too big. He could not destroy the entire Great Zhou team alone. Emperor Zhou had the power to fight. If they wanted to crush and annihilate them, they would need at least 2 powerful cultivators like Lu Ming. Emperor Zhou would definitely die. However, the War God Temple had no enmity with the Great Zhou Empire. Suddenly, a guess appeared in Qin Hao's mind. The War God Temple might not be the only force in the abyss. He guessed that Han Qingji might be here. Therefore, the force that attacked should be Daqin cultivators. Zhou Wudao lifted his face. His eyes were blood red. He gritted his teeth so hard that a trace of blood appeared. Boom! Just as he finished speaking, the void shook violently. An extremely shocking aura followed Zhou Wudao. It tore through space and appeared in front of Qin Hao again. Golden armor shone brightly. The burly and muscular figure was extremely intimidating. It was Lu Ming. Lu Ming was ordered by Zhang Yan to kill Zhou Wudao. Head Wu Kei's voice was like a sword piercing his eardrums, making him realize that this Emperor Lord beside Li Chusan was a little different from the rest. Southern Region Sword Sect, True Extreme Sword Emperor, Shouwuk. Shouwuk reported his name. In Sword City, he had obtained the Nirvana Sword will of the Lord of the Manor's first sword. It was called the True Extreme Sword, so from now on, His title was True Extreme Sword Lord. Southern Region Sword Sect? Lu Guwei sneered. Never heard of it. Zhou Wu's face darkened slightly. The sword ring under his feet suddenly bloomed, and an incomparably dazzling sword radiance radiated out as he walked toward Lu Guwei. Seeing this, Qin Hao raised his hand and put it on Zhou Wu's shoulder. He shook his head at him and said to Lu Guwei, Commander Lu Guwei, where it is possible to let people off, you should spare them. 2 generations of elite masters of the Zhou clan have been slaughtered by you. Even if Zhou Wudao survives, he alone poses no threat. Does Commander Lu Guwei think that he can still shake the Sunset War God? A stray dog. Is he worthy? Lu Guwei said. You. Zhou Wudao clenched his fists. His fingers sank into his flesh as if his bones were about to be crushed. Qin Hao pressed down on Zhou Wu with one hand and Zhou Wudao with the other. He continued, since Commander Lu Guwei thinks that he is not worthy, what harm is there in sparing his life? The great Zhou imperial family is completely devoid of vitality. It is already extremely difficult to protect the Zhou clan's property. If Commander Lu Guwei is willing to let him go, I am willing to give 5 upper-grade Emperor weapons to Commander Lu Guwei and the 2 behind you. What do you think? When Lucan heard 5 high-grade Emperor artifacts, his eyes immediately widened. His heart fiercely shook several times. The 2 8th-stage Dao, confirming Emperor generals behind him also revealed a trace of astonishment. 5 high-grade Emperor artifacts. Li Chuzin's spending was indeed not small. The overlords of the 5 realms of the East continent naturally had Emperor weapons. The War God Temple was the leader of the 5 realms. They had even more Emperor weapons. However, there were also many experts under the War God. After distributing them evenly, each person only had 1 Emperor weapon. Lu Guwei still had a hand over the Emperor weapons he had obtained in the ruins. Therefore, Emperor weapons were still very rare. Each one was very precious. After all, the number of refiner emperors in the East continent was limited. There were even fewer refiner masters who could prove their Dao in the 9 realms. There was only one in the 5 realms, Mu Xinjiao. Mu Xinjiao's cultivation had been sealed by the War God and fed to the Emperor body to nurture the Sunset Peak. He no longer had the chance or ability to forge Emperor weapons. Now, every upper-grade Emperor weapon lost meant 1 less in the East continent. How could Lu Guwei not be moved by Li Chuji's gift of 5? 5? Haha, not enough. Lu Guwei put his hands behind his back and shook his head. 8. Qin Hao added 3 more. Not enough. 10. Still not enough. Qin Hao frowned. Commander Lu Guwei, enough is enough. You and I know the deal between you and me. The War God doesn't know. You don't have to hand it over. No matter how many Emperor weapons you have, you can't use them all. 10 was not enough. It was enough to arm Lu Guwei to the teeth. He had 10 Emperor weapons on him. Even Deng Xiang would have to retreat if he encountered him. No, you're wrong. Under the War God's will, not to mention 10, even 20, 30, or 100 are not enough. Because I don't have the life to use them. Li Chuji, I know you have a lot of Emperor weapons. To be honest, I'm very tempted. If it were someone else, I would have resisted the pressure to trade with you. However, Zhou Wudao was brought back by Zhang Yan. I have to do it. Lu Guwei sighed. He felt extremely regretful. He also wanted to trade. However, he did not dare to trade. Who was Zhang Yan? What was his temper? Killing Zhou Di was to curry favor with Qing Jihan. If he ruined Zhang Yan's plan, would Lu Guwei have a good time in the future? He could not afford to offend him. Qin Hao's face darkened. In the end, Lu Guwei was just patronizing him. What if I must protect him? Protect him? Lu Guwei was startled. He smiled and said, You should protect yourself first. I don't know why Deng Xiang let you come, but I believe that he must have gone easy on you. I know that guy's strength best. He is at the peak of doctrine attainment and half-step to enlightened self. Even 2 of me together are not his match. If he insists on stopping you, it won't be easy for the 3 of you to join forces. I'll definitely tell Zhang Yan about this when I get back and make things difficult for Deng Xiang. That a bit off topic. Zhang Yan is waiting for you not far away. You took his flames of the way and prevented him from reaching doctrine attainment. Do you think Zhang Yan will let you go? That's between me and him. Qin Hao wanted to protect Zhou Wudao now. No, it's the same thing. He will deal with you sooner or later. According to my understanding of him, if it's just taking the flames of the way, he won't kill you because you are Dinda's descendant. However, you dare to mess with him trying to curry favor with Qingji Han. Haha, Li Chuji, do you know the consequences? What consequences? Qin Hao asked. Becoming enemies with the War God Temple, Lu Gui replied solemnly. Although Zhan Yin wasn't liked by the God of War, he was the adopted son of the War Tower's commander. Now, the War God Temple had 3 supreme commanders. Apart from the War Tower, there were 2 other commanders. One of them only cared about cultivation. The second one was rumored to have gone to the mortal world to flirt again. He said that he wanted to experience the hardships of the mortal world, but he was actually a dissolute person. As for the War Tower, it could be said that they were in charge of the War God Temple. After all, the War God never asked about the affairs of the War God Temple. The tens of thousands of divine guards and the commanders of the 3 factions all followed the War Tower's lead. Li Chuji protecting Zhou Wudao was tantamount to openly provoking Zhan Yin. Among the tens of thousands of divine guards, the weakest was a high-level Renhuang. Most of them were peak Renhuangs and Emperor Yuan, the commanders of the 3 factions, and nearly 20 emperors who had reached doctrine attainment. How terrifying was their strength! With just a word from Zhan Yin, half of the divine guards and above were willing to serve him. Once the War God Temple rushed to Qilin Dao Mountain, destroying the Dao sect would be a piece of cake. One must know that only Tai Wei and Samu were needed to destroy the great Zhou royal family. However, the War God Temple had more divine guards than Daqin. Squeak! Shouwuk clenched his fists so tightly that they trembled a little. Li Wanji's face suddenly became extremely ugly. The War God Temple, the supreme power of the East Continent, was actually this terrifying? Even if the 7 heroes of the South joined forces, they probably wouldn't be able to resist them. What's more, above the 20 emperors, there were 3 supreme commanders. And the number 1 powerhouse in the continent, the Twilight War God, Tian Yun, Qian Ning, and the other fairies of the sacred palace trembled when they heard this. This was the reason why Empress Shui Yao and Li Chuji made a seemingly unfair agreement before leaving. The Shui Yao sacred palace was an overlord in the south, but in front of the absolute supreme forces, it was like a flower that couldn't withstand the destruction of the wind. The lineup of powerhouses under Empress Lingxian of Daqin wasn't much worse than that of the War God. Do you understand now? Don't waste my time. Hand him over. Lu Gui was a little impatient. There were 20 commanders like him in the War God Temple, and half of them were stronger than him. Zhou Wudao looked at Qin Hao with great difficulty. He naturally knew that Qin Hao wouldn't hand him over easily. After all, the 2 sides had made a heavenly agreement. When one side was in trouble and needed the other side's help, the other side had to go all out. If the other side refused, they would be punished by the heavens. But in the current situation, if he didn't leave, Qin Hao would become enemies with Zhan Yin and the War God Temple. Even if Qin Hao's cultivation was extraordinary, how could he bear it? Moreover, Zhou Wudao vaguely guessed from Zhou Wendy's performance that Qin Hao might be the one from the East Continent. Even so, Qin Hao still needed time to grow. After all, his cultivation in his previous life didn't exist anymore, and the Twilight Bough was also taken by Zhan Wu. Qin Hao needed time very much. If Zhou Wudao dragged him down and caused him to be exposed, then this life would be ruined by his hands. Would he be able to live with his conscience? Even if Qin Hao could save him today, would they be able to get out of the relic? The War God Temple was guarding the exit. He's my friend, Qin Hao said. His tone was very calm, but his eyes were as firm as ever. Zhou Wudao's heart ached when he heard this. Stupid, Lu Gui said in a low voice. Was his words in vain? Buzz. At that moment, a ball of dazzling emperor light erupted between heaven and earth. Lu Gui's tall and burly body stepped forward and landed in front of the sacred palace team with a single step. His powerful palm stretched out towards Zhou Wudao like the hand of a god that could not be defied. Just as the palm was about to grab Zhou Wu Dao, a bright golden sword light erupted from Shou Wu's position and slashed toward Lu Gui's palm. Chapter 1786. Liu had been ordered to capture Zhou Wu Dao, but if he could not bring him back, he would not be able to answer to Zhang Yan. Shou Wu and Zhou Wu Dao were not close, but as disciples of the Divine Palace, how could he sit back and do nothing when he heard that Zhou Wu Dao's family had been destroyed, his father and brother killed, and his clan wiped out? The true extreme sword master had to protect his people. The two great emperors who had proven their way were suddenly caught in a fight. This time, Qin had not stopped Shou Wu from fighting. Wu had just broken through to the great emperor realm and needed to stabilize his realm. Fighting was the best way to train his will. Liu was a divine general of Sunset Peak and had been chosen by the strongest warrior on the continent, the god of war. His strength was beyond doubt. It would not be easy for Wu to defeat him, but it did not mean that he did not have the ability to fight back. Wu's talent in the way of the sword was very strong. He could be called a peerless genius in the way of the sword. Since childhood, he had been influenced by Makamanji, the sword master, so he understood the way of the emperor very well. Moreover, in Sword City, his Yuan spirit Emperor Lotus had been baptized by millions of sword wills and formed the sword will of all things. The power of the primitive elements was already stronger than that of ordinary emperors. Qin Hao was not worried about this battle. He also wanted to see how strong Zhang Wu's talents were. After all, Liu and the other divine generals were Cao Wu's future opponents. The dazzling golden sword light slashed down. The golden liquid sword Qi completely solidified and turned into an emperor-level divine sword that slashed down. It contained an extremely sharp sword will. Lu Gui's eyes landed on Shou Wu. He did not evade and continued to move forward. The divine sword slashed out, and his palm suddenly burst with an extremely turbulent emperor's light. It seemed to have turned into a sturdy hand of steel. A pair of black gloves appeared on it and collided with the divine sword. Suddenly, the golden divine sword shattered, turning into fragments that scattered on the gloves. However, a terrifying force came over, and Lu Gui's forward steps suddenly stopped. His body swayed. Not bad. Liu watched Shou Wu preach. His way of the sword was full of power, and his sword spirit was of a very high level. Unfortunately, his strength was lacking. This person seemed to have just proven his way, and his emperor-level sword was not enough. What about this? Golden sword radiance flashed in Shou Wu's eyes. In an instant, thousands of sword shadows appeared around him. The dense and dazzling sword shadows surrounded him. Each one of them was like the emperor's divine sword just now. They were completely solid. The entire void was filled with golden sword radiance. It was majestic, dazzling, and extremely shocking. Lu Gui's expression changed immediately. He had personally experienced the power of that sword. Now, Swordmaster Jinji had gathered thousands of divine swords. The divine general of the Twilight Battle God had no choice but to put on a serious expression. He no longer dared to underestimate his opponent. Liu's eyes narrowed into slits and became extremely gloomy. A powerful force exploded from his body as his emperor-level spirit was released. The emperor's light on his body changed. The platinum color turned into a grayish-white color. His body continued to expand. The space he was in was filled with a grayish-white color. It radiated wildly, as if it was going to swallow the entire sky of the dark abyss. Finally, the scene of sunset and dusk disappeared. Everyone seemed to be in another space. Although they were still in the dark abyss, everything they saw turned into the color of Liu's body. The pitch-black demon city and the ferocious mountains in the distance all turned into one color. They were affected by the power of his emperor-level spirit. In this world, Liu seemed to have become the ruler. A terrifying aura surged from his body. His body grew larger and larger until it became extremely majestic. He became 1,000 zhang tall. He was like a grayish-white god of war standing between heaven and earth. His might suppressed all living beings and ruled over endless mountains and rivers. Emperor-level body of great path. Qin Hao mumbled. Luyo was able to gather Emperor-level spirits into his body and increase the power of Emperor-level will. He was not simple. He might have underestimated this person before. This person's Emperor-level spirit must be very powerful. The towering Luyo lowered his head and stared at the tiny Showuk. At this moment, he seemed to have turned into a god of the dark abyss. He raised his arm and pressed it down on Showuk. There was nothing fancy about it. A grayish-white liquid surged on his palm. It was filled with terrifying corrosive power. It seemed to be able to melt even the emperors of the world and corrode everything. Everyone from the sacred palace trembled. How could the divine general of the god of war be simple? Tianyun and the others began to worry for Showuk. Showuk was not afraid. He raised his head and looked at the godlike Luyo. There was not even a trace of emotion on his face. The way of the sword was to press forward. This was the heart of the sword that he had always adhered to. In Sword City, the Nirvana Sword Emperor who had mastered a trace of the divine path had chosen him because of this. He had left the heart of the Nirvana Sword Way to this proud swordsman of the future. Showuk could withstand the murderous intent of the all-encompassing metal. How could he be frightened by Luyo? Rumble. Thunder rumbled in the void. Showuk pointed his sword to the sky. The will of the emperor resonated with the great path. Tianyun, Xiaogua, and the others were shocked. Luyo was actually so powerful. Qin Hao was very calm. He was not worried about Wuk's situation. If he was defeated like this, he would not be the real Showuk. At this moment, an incomparably sacred golden light burst out. The golden sword lotus of the great path was born under Showuk's feet. The petals opened, and millions of sword chi flew out. In an instant, golden light shone everywhere. Before Luyo's giant palm could even get close, it exploded and shattered. It was torn into nothingness by the millions of golden sword chi. It doesn't matter if the will of the emperor is lacking. My sword spirit is very strong. Showuk put his hands behind his back. He stood on the golden sword lotus of the great path. Endless sword will float around his body, making him look as dashing as a celestial sword deity. His hair turned light gold, and his temperament was unparalleled. One of Luyo's giant palm was completely severed. It was forcefully shattered into nothingness by the light of the sword lotus of the great path. Pain appeared on his giant face. His opponent's will of the great path was not as profound as his, but his sword spirit was indeed strong. It was more difficult to deal with than he had imagined. He let out a roar, and Luyo's giant body of the great path surged with majestic grayish-white water. It was filled with a monstrous aura of death. He punched out, and a torrent flooded the world. It swallowed Showuk. The grayish-white torrent was like the river of Yellow Spring. It roared and surged forward. At this moment, the petals of the golden sword lotus of the great path closed, enveloping Showuk's entire body. The dazzling sword aura exploded and shot up into the sky. It turned into a sword shape and shot straight forward. It entered the river of Yellow Spring and went against the current, all the way to the source. Everyone saw that in the process of the golden sword aura flying, the sword was constantly eroded and weakened by the river of Yellow Spring. However, it still reached Luyo's body of the great path and penetrated through his giant body. Between heaven and earth, a terrifying explosion exploded. That giant body was completely shattered by the sword aura and slowly disappeared. Whoosh! The grayish-white color that swallowed up the sky of the abyss faded and returned to the previous scene. It was sunset and dusk again. In the air, Luyo looked at Showuk with a cold expression. Showuk's clothes were in tatters. They were eroded by the river of Yellow Spring, and his aura was also somewhat weakened. However, he had broken Luyo's river of Yellow Spring body. It was broken by someone whose will of the emperor was not as good as his. Luyo's expression was very ugly. One could imagine how he felt at the moment. The space became silent again. After a few breaths, Luyo said, "Sword Master Jinji?" This time, he asked very seriously, Chapter 1787. Lu Guwei had come under orders and returned without accomplishing anything. Even though he had failed to capture Zhou Wudao, the pressure still existed after Lu Guwei left. Everyone felt uneasy. In this battle, the Holy Palace, Xiaogua, and the others once again witnessed the power of the War God Temple. Lu Guwei was very strong. His Emperor Dao body and the water of the Yellow Springs left a deep impression on everyone. Many of the people present had extraordinary talent. Qin Yun, Yi Shuihan, Xiaogua, Chen Wanqin, and even Qian Ning had all cultivated in the Divine Palace. They asked themselves, could they fight against Lu Guwei if they became emperors? Many people were uncertain. If a martial artist didn't enter the imperial realm, they could rely on their own talent to crush opponents of the same realm and even challenge opponents of higher realms. After stepping into the imperial realm, the advantage of talent was no longer obvious. Every Emperor Yuan had mastered some kind of Dao intent, especially the imperial lord powerhouses. Their Dao intent had reached perfection, reaching the limit of the Dao. Under such circumstances, individual talent was almost useless. It depended on who had the most thorough understanding of the Dao, and the rules they could exert would be more tyrannical. However, Shouwu's performance this time boosted everyone's confidence. Tell me, how do you feel? Qin Hao asked. Lucan is much stronger than Song Yao. I can't win against him in a normal fight, but in a life-and-death battle, I will definitely be able to drag him down with me. Shouwu was very confident about this and spoke the truth. Qin Hao smiled and said, Song Yao didn't really reach the 9th tier of the imperial realm. His Emperor Dao was only promoted to the imperial realm because of external forces. Moreover, Lu Guwei has been famous for a long time. His strength is naturally stronger than Song Yao's. Don't belittle yourself. I believe that in time, it won't be difficult for you to defeat Lu Guwei. Yes. Shouwu nodded and said, at most a few decades. Give me a few more decades, and I will be able to defeat him. After the Imperial Soul Sword Lotus was destroyed and reborn, its essence had changed. He needed this time to fully comprehend and perfectly exert the power of the Vientiane Gold. When Yi Shuihan and the others heard this, they were surprised. It would take a few decades to reach Lu Guwei's current strength. The gap was so big. A few decades was too long. Actually, what is more outstanding than you think? Qin Hao chuckled as he saw through everyone's thoughts. A few decades? Was that long? To a great emperor who had lived for more than 1,000 years, a mere few decades were equivalent to a few days in the eyes of ordinary people. What could work very hard? Furthermore, a few decades to completely control the Vientiane Gold was definitely his limit. By the way, what happened to your rules? Qin Hao curiously asked. It was like a group of wronged souls seeking justice from the world. The space was filled with extreme demonic qi. It was as if countless ancient demons were buried in this gate. Qingji Han and Zhang Yin both stared at the demonic gate very seriously. Their hearts beat uneasily. The power coming from the demonic gate made them yearn for it, but there seemed to be countless voices in their hearts urging them not to enter. Qingji, do you feel it? It's calling. Zhang Yin couldn't help but say. There was a hint of excitement in his palpitating face. He had a feeling that if he could get the power from the demonic gate, he would undergo earth-shaking changes. Perhaps he could surpass the War Tower and even the Sunset Battle God. Han Qingji also had a very strong feeling. At this moment, her eyes became deeper and deeper, as though they had transformed into two abysses. She had completely lost the whites of her eyes. The power of nirvanic extermination radiated from her body, resonating with the demonic gate. It was as though she belonged here. Ah, kill, kill, kill. A crazy howl broke the silence. Then, a turbulent emperor's light erupted from the Daqin team. The sudden explosion killed several peak-level Renhuangs in succession and rushed toward Qingji Han and Zhang Yin. Meng Xiang and the others were protecting Qingji Han and Zhang Yin. Then, they looked toward the direction of the commotion and found that Emperor Yuan of Daqin was surrounded by demonic qi. His eyes turned blood red, as if he had lost his mind. He attacked everyone crazily and was running toward them. His speed was several times faster than usual, and his aura was constantly rising. A bunch of good-for-nothings. Three-Eyed roared. His face was ferocious as he stared at the figure rushing toward him. A dazzling light burst out from his forehead. His divine eye opened, and the terrible divine light directly shot through the body of his opponent, dispelling the strong demonic aura. At the same time, the powerful lethality also annihilated the person in one blow. Emperor Yuan of the Daqin Empire, who was in the 5th tier of the Dao realm, was directly erased from the world. Meng Xiang glanced at Meng Xiang. He was really ruthless and didn't hesitate at all. However, there was no other way. The demonic souls wandering in the abyss would often suddenly come out to seize the body of a living emperor. Once they occupied the body of a living emperor, they would lose control and could only kill the person. Otherwise, staying here would be a disaster. In the beginning, Meng Xiang could still use the divine light to purify the demonic souls and not hurt his subordinates. Later, the power of the demonic souls became stronger and stronger, and even Meng Xiang couldn't restrain them. Wake up! Don't be bewitched by the demonic souls again. Qing Jihan's voice spread to the rear. After all, these people were here to protect her, but she didn't expect that they would become useless now. Zhou Wudao clenched his fists tightly and tried to control himself. Although it was Sanmu and Tai Wei who killed his father, brother, and clansmen, in fact, Zhang Yan was the instigator. He was the original murderer. Although he hated Zhang Yan, there was still fear in Zhou Wudao's eyes. It was a fear that couldn't be disguised. Zhang Yan had killed the elites of the great Zhou dynasty in an instant. Because he couldn't touch them at all, that was why he dared to come alone without any hesitation. He stood in front of the Tribulation Sword Emperor and asked for an explanation. Who could touch the young master of the War God Temple? Who dared? Prince Wudao's family has been destroyed. As a friend, I cannot sit by and do nothing. Previously, I promised Commander Lufeng that I was willing to exchange 3 Emperor weapons for Prince Wudao's life. The deal is still valid. As for the flames of the way, it's even simpler. I have a type of flame in my possession that is of a much higher grade than the fire of the divine tree. If young Master Zhang Yan refines it, you can also raise your Dao Proving Realm. Do you want to refine it? Qin Hao said, Red Lotus Overlord Fire. Refine it as long as you have enough power. With his Red Lotus Overlord Fire, he could also improve his cultivation. After all, Qin Hao had become an Imperial Lord while Zhang Yan was only in the 2nd tier of the Dao Proving Realm. Haha, you're asking me if I dare? Zhang Yan laughed, as if he had heard the funniest joke in the world. Do you know what my soul fire is? The fire of hell can devour all things, and can also refine other flames of the way. Qin Hao replied, This was not a secret. You have good eyesight. Since you know, why would you ask such a stupid question? You're a descendant of Dendi. In terms of status, you're on equal footing with me. Back then, the war god ancestor and Dinda were brothers. If Dinda hadn't died back then, you and I would be as close as brothers today. Damn it, the 4 traitors of the Daqin plotted to seize power. Forget it, let's not talk about the past. I don't want to hurt you. Do you dare to refine it? Zhang Yan raised his head proudly. He would let Dinda's descendants see if he dared to refine it. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.